What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Vanguard. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon here in Kansas City, and it's a super special live stream, a conversation that's been a long time coming, one that we're super excited to have. That's our debate with Sam Seder about internet censorship and social media deplatforming. We're super excited to get into the weeds with Sam on this one. I think it's going to be a great conversation. Really looking forward to it. But yeah, how you doing, man?
Yeah, doing great, doing great. Obviously, having Sam on today going to be an interesting discussion. We're going to be, chatting about internet censorship, the benefits of and harms of deplatforming. It'll be a nice civilized discussion today, guys. I think it'll be a really nice, good conversation. Sam seems like a good guy, so we're happy to have him on the show. But as always, we begin every episode with a shout out to our patrons. So shout out to all the comrades, Vanguardians, Super Vanguardians, everybody. Obviously, you're all comrades to us. You make the wheels on the van go round and round, and we appreciate you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're about to introduce our special guest for today, obviously, that being Mr. Sam Seder of the Majority Report. Before we do so, make sure to hit that like button, everyone. We're going to want to boost this stream in the algorithm. I think this is an important conversation. I hope some more eyes are able to view it. I think it's a really important, it's going to be a really substantive conversation, not just about, the First Amendment and about free speech itself, but also about optics, how the left should come off as we near the midterms, especially, and with the rising, Trumpist fascism in this country. Like, I think it's important to talk about how the left is being viewed by people, how it kind of comes off optically. So it's going to be an important conversation. Again, make sure to hit that like button. If you're not already, make sure to subscribe as well if you're new to the channel. And yeah, I guess with all that said, without further ado, let's welcome to the stream, Mr. Sam Seder. How you doing, Sam?
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking some time out of your holiday weekend.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I guess a great place for us to kind of kickstart this off would be, as we kind of mentioned in the intro to the show, we're going to be having a kind of a conversation about our differences and views on maybe the benefits or the setbacks from deplatforming individuals from the internet. Some would broadly call it censorship. Whatever the terminology you're more comfortable with. But yeah, I wondered if just for our audience, you could kind of lay out your viewpoint on this. Gavin and I were pretty rigidly pro free speech, across platforms. And I wondered, if you could lay out kind of your outlook on that.
Sure. I think that the best way to address any of the issues that people have in terms of people being deplatformed on social media, for instance, is to make these platforms less precious, insofar as, there's nobody who's really completely deplatformed from the internet, right? Like even Alex Jones, I think, can be on Rumble or Gab or something like that. So the issue really becomes, are you taking him off a place where there is a real concentration of all the eyeballs? And is that unfair? Like, has Twitter or YouTube become the town square? And from my perspective, I would like to basically prevent companies from being the town square. I don't think the town square should be a private enterprise. And I'm not quite sure how you would do it with government ownership of that platform. So the best, from my perspective, the best thing to do would be to heavily regulate these corporations. Maybe you do it by limiting certain algorithms. Maybe you do it by making it far less profitable for them, not allowing certain data scraping. There's all sorts of mechanisms basically under the umbrella of antitrust where you could prevent a Twitter or a YouTube from having such market dominance that to be kicked off of one of these sites is such an issue. And the flip side of that is I don't know what it is that people want to have happen in terms of these private corporations. If you tell me that, like, well, government should step in and regulate these corporations in such a way that they can deplatform no one, let's say I would be far more interested. One, I think that's problematic because I don't know how you draw those lines. And then you're asking the government to do it. And I think that's far more dangerous.
Right.
Than having, small private entities make that decision based upon their own, terms of service. But I just don't know how you execute, the idea of you're not allowed to deplatform somebody.
Well,
And then at that juncture, that's both a combination of like the principle and the practicality. And faced with this reality, I am not, I don't really have a problem when I see right wingers being deplatformed.
Sure.
I don't.
That's yeah. No, if you want to finish, that's fine. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I don't, I know the arguments, the more sort of practical, less sort of like ideological arguments as to why you wouldn't want right wingers to be deplatformed on YouTube, because ostensibly it could come for left wingers. But the reality is that, I think historically the left has always been deplatformed. In fact, they have not been platformed. So there's not an opportunity to deplatform, particularly in the context of like cable news and broader communication systems. And also, I would just say that, like, if you move to that realm of argument, which is a more sort of strategic one, in other words, don't advocate for Alex Jones to be deplatformed because then they'll come for Sam Seder, and you don't want that. My argument would be that, like, it's a net benefit for the world to lose Alex Jones on YouTube and to lose Sam Seder. Honestly, like if that was to come to it, my audience is not that big. I think he does more damage than I do good. And I think across the board, you can see that dynamic as in play. Now, if there was a different balance of power, maybe that argument would have different implications. But
Sure.
I'm taking the world as it is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, let's take the world as it is, because we're, you start off by kind of talking about these hypotheticals of like, well, should the government intervene to prevent deplatforming? Obviously, that's not the, current case. Unfortunately, social media companies, as you refer to them, the new town square, unfortunately, it is, in the hands of these big companies. And I think it's kind of hard to deny that, whether it's Spotify or Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, et cetera, these kind of companies are the new public square, so to speak. So again, let's talk about things as they are, not in the hypothetical about, what should the government do. Let's talk about things right now as they are. Hopefully things change, but right now it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And the fact of the matter is, Sam, is that you have advocated for the deplatforming of not just Alex Jones, but people like Joe Rogan, for example, during the coronavirus pandemic, when you were on MSNBC. We did a segment about it at the time, basically, implying, if not straight up advocating for Spotify to deplatform Joe Rogan, take him down.
No, I was saying that Spotify has to be responsible if Joe Rogan could go onto YouTube. Joe Rogan has a massive audience.
Well, here's my problem with that.
Spotify has to take responsibility. In fact, I think in that instance, and I specifically did not use the word deplatform, but I think Spotify has to be held to account in that instance, right? They are making millions of dollars off of, in the context of a public health emergency, they are making millions of dollars off of selling against the message that, complete and total misinformation. And so, yeah, I would want to, if there was a mechanism in which you could hold Spotify to account, lawsuits, or, we don't have any statutory stuff, but yeah, I would be completely in favor of that.
All right, well, let's go from there.
Then they make a business decision as to what they're going to do with Joe Rogan.
Okay, well, let's go from there then. Say they did decide to deplatform Joe Rogan. Do you remember what happened around the time that the calls for that were happening? I think it was either Gab or Rumble. I forget exactly which one, but they basically offered Joe Rogan to replicate his Spotify deal for $100 million for him to come on over there. And that's kind of my problem with this whole argument. Deplatforming someone like Joe Rogan from Spotify would be the biggest gift imaginable to sites like Gab or Rumble or Parler or Truth Social, example, or go on, which are literal cesspools of right-wing extremism and bigotry, far more than any of the current, social media platforms. And I think that when someone has kind of disappeared, from Twitter or YouTube, liberals often think out of sight, out of mind. And, they just kind of think that because they aren't being exposed to that content, that no one else is either. But in reality, the censored content creator simply takes their business and their audience to an even more extreme right-wing echo chamber, further radicalizing themselves and their audience in the process, plus growing those platforms such as Gab, such as Rumble in the process, which then gives an even bigger microphone and even bigger platform to all the other extremists that are already on those platforms. So, I just don't think that even if Spotify did deplatform him, again, he's just going to go to Rumble, he's just going to go to Gab, and then his audience and himself are even going to become further radicalized, further right-wing, and nobody wins. We've just kind of removed the, situation from out of sight, but it's still a problem.
Well, I mean, I think I don't think that argument is not without merit. I mean, I think that's a decent argument against it. I happen to think that they were full of shit, that they don't have that kind of money. They weren't going to pay Joe Rogan that money. They knew he wasn't. It was a publicity stunt. And even if they were, they wouldn't make that money back. For Spotify, it's a lost leader. And it gets people within their closed universe. Spotify, it makes people become members of Spotify. I mean, that's why they do that. And it's sort of the same sort of model that like HBO or Netflix would do, even if their show is not necessarily getting ratings, if it's getting a lot of attention, it has value to them. And I think, so I'm not quite convinced, frankly, that he could move over there, but I don't know if that would necessarily be a bad thing. Again, I mean, if the idea is that like, I think there's some argument that like if you got a bunch of Joe Rogan listeners going over into a platform that has a bunch of like a cesspool, like you say, I think there's a legitimate argument that you might be sort of leading people to water that you don't want them to drink, as it were. But so I think that that has some merit, and I'd have to like maybe see an example of that to see if it works out that way. But aside from that, again,
I think there's many examples of it working out that way. Like, for example, Nick Fuentes is someone who was censored by, a lot of the major social media companies. He then went and started his own. It's called Cozy, and a lot of right-wingers now exist there. Again, there's no left-wing, pushback that happens on that platform. It's just a bunch of right-wingers. It's just a complete echo chamber. I'd rather him be, around on the current existing social medias than create an even worse echo chamber elsewhere.
Well, I don't know. An echo chamber, a genuine echo chamber, is the reason why it echoes is because it's sort of hermetically sealed. And I am of the mind that there is going to be in this country a certain number of people like that. And I think the sort of primary directive right now is limiting the number of people. I mean, I think you could argue, if you want to argue that deplatforming actually helps, the right. I think that if I saw genuine evidence of that, I might change my perspective. And now we're just talking in terms of what's the best strategy. I think there's evidence that, for instance, with Alex Jones, he has less viewers than he had before, and he has probably less growth. I would probably argue that Nick Fuentes also less growth. I would argue that everyone who leaves, YouTube has less growth. I mean, there's a reason why nobody's voluntarily leaving these things. It's because that's where the eyeballs are. And it's conceivable that if a Joe Rogan went there, you would bring a bunch of those eyeballs and maybe that would grow there. It's possible. And if that was to happen, then I would join it. And I would start to do some pushback there as well.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I wanted to kind of connect this to something that we've all kind of seen on YouTube, right? One of the things that I think you were really early to, Sam, was understanding that YouTube was dominated by right-wing sort of talk show hosts, right? And there was a need for somebody to call in and take phone calls from libertarians and be like, guys, this is just not a viable political plan or strategy for our country, right? It created that need and it facilitated that need. And I think one of the concerns that Gavin and I have about deplatforming or removing somebody from, like Alex Jones, to use a big example. Obviously odious. Nobody likes or cares about Alex Jones. At least I hope not in our audience, right? So you have a guy like him, but he's still he is and it always baffles me when I go and look at the numbers that he's getting on his InfoWars website and the amount of money that he's able to rake in, and I worry that if we go down this rabbit hole where we try and push them out of sight, that not only will we get the double, like the example that comes to my mind is that Donald got removed from Reddit and then immediately they take down a show like Chapo Trap House, which is just an innocuous like leftist show that really wasn't inciting violence or anything like that. But you create all of these people who, you're right, less people, undoubtedly less people watch InfoWars now than they did when they were in their heyday on YouTube. But the faction of people that still do are now so removed and isolated from having to grapple with material like the kind of content that we all make, which is, hey, let's look at this piece of like right-wing content or whatever, and let's talk about how absolutely absurd it is, how it's not rooted in any kind of reality, how they are using you, they are manipulating all of your fears and all of your anxieties and all of your worries in a way that is channeling them to their direct benefit and complete emptiness for you, right? I worry that if we go down the rabbit hole of, okay, we just kick all these fuckers off of the internet or where we're going to see them, right? And of course, that's in one hand, okay, yeah, you don't have to see all these crazy people that are terrible all of the time, but I worry that they're going to bring those people over, and then it's almost like we don't even realize what's happening. Like another example is the Andrew Tate phenomenon. I don't know how much you followed of that. I didn't really even understand the extent of this guy's just like out of like mask off misogyny, just like women are property, like fuck as many hoes as you want, and like get your, like it really, like this is like his blueprint, and he's getting a massive audience. And I just worry if you ban guys like that, who of course, like I don't think anybody with a functioning brain should listen to them for advice or for any kind of content. But if you isolate them, then I don't know what's happening, and I can't make content for people to be like, this is crazy, guys, this is absolutely not the way to think. So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think, like I say, I think that I think there's a good argument on both sides of this, and it's one that is basically like, theoretically someone could figure this out, right? Like, I mean, there is a number, right? I mean, there is like where did Tate get his following? My guess is on one of these platforms that we're talking about. I mean, and someone could theoretically go like, okay, Nick Fuentes, like, is he growing? Is he just dying on the vine? And the point is that if there is a sense that this is happening over there, and it's problematic that we can't reach those audiences, there's no reason why we can't go over there too. So like, and again, this is distinct. If it were up to me, there would be a bunch of different like little platforms, and these things would be siloed, because frankly, with all due respect to you and with all due respect to me, we're not winning. Like, we're not winning that battle. And so, and like I say, if we were, then maybe my perspective and maybe the analysis that you're talking about would be different, right? It would be like, if we did have the ability to, if I had the ability to sort of speak to Crowder's audience, let's say, and, show them, all of them, how ridiculous a lot of what he says is, then I think the calculus might be different, but it's not.
So do you think Steven Crowder should be censored?
Do I think he should be booted from YouTube?
Yeah.
You know what I would do if I were YouTube? What I would do is say, you can be on here, you're not monetized, you cannot advertise for any mechanism which will you can't advertise for your membership. I mean, for instance, like I've had deals in the past, not currently, where a public radio station wants to, or a community radio station wants to carry my show, and the terms are no ads and no selling your memberships.
So you don't think that right wingers should be able to like make content and like monetize it online? Just
Well,
anyone that you
no,
disagree
no,
with?
no. I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm saying that if they cross the terms of service, for instance, let's just do a hypothetical because I don't watch Crowder that much, but I do think some of his stuff I think crosses the line.
I also
Obviously,
don't watch it that much.
right. Obviously, YouTube feels that it has crossed the line because they suspended him for a week or whatever it is. I'm not sure the details. But let's just say that there's somebody out there, John Stevenson, it's a made up name, and he is openly advocating for the elimination of Jews in our society, just as an example.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think that would be a direct threat of violence, right? That's a little bit different.
no, it's not a direct threat of violence. It's saying that this society would be much better off without Jews. And I think that's the case. We should, there should be an elimination of Jews. And
So you think that's where the line should be drawn if you're advocating for the extermination of Jewish people?
I'm just using that as an example because I think we all agree that that is past the line. I don't know where exactly the line should be if I was in charge of
But
YouTube.
that's a line that's already kind of determined by the First Amendment. Like the First Amendment doesn't guarantee you the right to commit or threaten acts of violence or to dox people, for example. Like there are lines in the sand that all of us can agree to.
The First Amendment is really, I mean, doxing is illegal, but saying I advocate the elimination of Jews, that's not illegal. It's not.
Right. I mean,
and the government, we're not talking about the First Amendment here because the First Amendment is not implicated because it's not the government doing this. I'm saying that wherever YouTube sees a line, whatever it is that line is, and they're just interested in maintaining they're interested in two things. Interested in maintaining their business, right? And they're interested in not having the government regulate them stringently. Okay. And so those are the two motivations that YouTube has. If I were YouTube, I would just simply say like, okay, you want to say this, and I don't know that I would say it with that person who's talking about eliminating Jews. I feel like I probably have a little stake in that. And I would say, yeah, no, you're not going to be on my platform. But for grayer areas, let's say, I would say like, you can be on this platform. You just cannot monetize it. So you have the ability to speak, but you don't have a right to make money off of that. And I would imagine he would still do it. It would involve a little bit of extra work insofar as that he has to, edit certain things out. Can't have paid advertisements in the thing. But if it's really a concern about ideas and not, basically two different entities making a ton of money off of shit that is toxic for society, then that seems to be a happy medium. I mean, but yes, I celebrate Steven Crowder being booted off for any reason whatsoever.
So is there a line you draw though? Like, because there's a lot of right wingers on YouTube, for example, that obviously they don't have the same reach as Steven Crowder. Same thing goes with Joe Rogan or any of these characters. Like they're kind of figureheads, but there's a ton of people under them. Do you think all of those people should be deplatformed or kicked off because they share opinions that are, radically different than your own? Because again, I disagree.
It's not a question of radically different. It's like, I think like things like transphobia, I think things like racism, I think things, and even more specifically, misinformation that actively harms people, I think, in the context of a pandemic, I think is really problematic. I mean, I wouldn't deplatform somebody for arguing that, Russia is not being imperialist by attacking Ukraine. They had no other choice. I mean, I wouldn't do that. But yeah, but I understand, like, I don't have the power to do any of this anyways.
Right.
So
it's all
I'm
hypothetical.
Right. But I mean, like, you wanted to move it back as to the world as it is now, as the world is now, like, yeah, I'm going to celebrate any right winger getting booted off of YouTube. And
I mean, I'll celebrate it too. Here's the thing. Like when Andrew Tate got banned, I wasn't shedding a tear for that motherfucker. Fuck Andrew Tate. He's a piece of garbage. Like I'm not shedding a tear at all. But when it comes to having a principle, I think sometimes the whole point of a principle is that regardless of who's at stake, you have to defend the principle. And I do fear that, for example, Elon Musk almost just bought up Twitter, right? That was about to happen. So now all of a sudden he would have been the guy in control. And currently the right wing is fear mongering about doctors that are providing, care to transgender people. All of a sudden, in a flip of a switch, the whole situation, the tables would be turned. I worry about that. We live right now, and I guess that the people that control the social media companies are nominally like liberal left, whatever. But what if that changed? I'm not comfortable with that, especially as someone that does traffic and, oftentimes pretty radical talking points just from a left wing perspective. I mean, what can I not make jokes about eating the rich, for example, or guillotining people? Like these are, parts of the leftist discourse that happens in these kind of niche online spaces. And, someone might look at that and say, what the hell? They're advocating for murder. They're advocating, genocide of the bourgeois or whatever. I don't think I should be banned off Twitter for making a joke.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't think you should be banned for that joke too. But I'll tell you what I said as soon as I heard that Elon Musk was going to buy Twitter. I don't give a shit, because that fucking guy wants to spend $42 billion on that. Good luck with it, motherfucker. And I mean, that's exactly what I said. Like, good luck. I don't give a shit. I don't. I guess this is my point. Like, the principle you're talking about, which I'm not, that like, is it everything should be allowed on the internet?
I think that. Oh, do you want me to answer that, or?
Well, I mean, I just posing it to Gavin, but you can both answer it. But like, what's the principle should be? Like, if that Joe Stevens says, fake name, says, yeah, I advocate the elimination of Jews. Should that guy not? Should a company just say like, oh, no problem with that?
I mean, I think there's definitely some sort of responsibility they have. And I think that demonetizing is a little bit different than straight up deplatforming. So in a case that's very extreme like that, yeah, I can see measures being taken. But generally, and I mean...
But if it's the principle, then you got to tell me, like, when, like...
Well, I think that crosses into a line of where it might not even be protected by the First Amendment. It depends on how it's phrased. I think a lot of it depends on how it's phrased. And again, I'm not trying to defend these disgusting right-wing arguments, but I also don't.
I understand, but I'm saying that the principle you're talking about, if it's a principle, because I don't have this principle, I just don't subscribe to it. I'm not a free speech absolutist, and I don't subscribe to. But if you have the principle, and you've got to deal with these situations, and you've got to be able to articulate where's the line, and then who imposes this. Is this the government forcing, like, basically adjudicating each one of these instances and then telling YouTube, okay, you can't demonetize him, or you can't deplatform him? I'm like, how does this actually work? Like, because the general principle, like philosophically speaking, to be honest with you, like those type of conversations, I don't care. Like, the philosophy, like I care about in practice, what happens in practice. And so my response is like, I can't come up with a system that works any better than the idea that there shouldn't be a corporately owned town hall.
Right. And I also disagree with the fact that there should be that, but that is the way it is. And do I think that the government should come in a sense that we're not already regulating these companies in the First Amendment? I would like to see that happen. I would like companies, social media companies, to be regulated within the bounds of the First Amendment. I think that would be ideal because, as you said, it is the new public square, and you can go out into the public and say terrible, problematic things. Unfortunately, I can go out to the coffee shop and have a conversation with Zach and some other people around me about how I hate women or whatever. Obviously, that's not something I would do, but like that is permissible. I'm not going to be arrested. I'm not going to be like taken out of the public setting for saying that. So in the same way, I just resist this idea.
The coffee shop could ask you to leave, though.
Well, if I was screaming and shouting, perhaps that's true.
They have the right. I mean, now look, I think there are certain protections that we have about why you can't be asked to leave a coffee shop. You can't be asked to leave a coffee shop if you're black.
You're right.
I think you can be asked to leave in probably half the states, maybe more, to leave if you're transgender. I don't know that the Supreme Court has addressed that.
Well, Sam, I mean, you platform people in the Majority Report via the phone calls that have all kinds of crazy views. Like why not just, not even let those people speak? I think that you've showed a really good way to deal with those people is to, face their arguments head on, attack their disinformation or hateful viewpoints and expose them. Like, for example,
I I think that if you were to impose like that First Amendment thing, like you're saying, like all those lesser conservatives out there, I definitely think that I would say that the standards based upon your audience, I think that's a pretty effective way, frankly, of I think that's a pretty effective way if I was going to, and like I say, I would much rather than deplatforming people, if I'm going to have the government regulate, rather than come in and adjudicate each situation based upon some analogy to the First Amendment, because it only becomes a First Amendment issue if the government owns the entity, right? But
well, I'm just saying as a principle, I think that they should try to uphold the First Amendment to the best of their abilities.
The government should.
No, the companies. In an ideal world, again, this is all hypothetical. I understand that they're private companies. I just don't think we should cheerlead it when they do censor and deplatform, especially as a left. I don't think that makes us look good. I think it, frankly, makes us look like pearl clutching, censorious, petty authoritarians. I
mean, more often than not, when I am cheering the deplatforming, I don't do it on my show. I think you'd be hard pressed to find, me do anything other than like, good, I don't give a shit. And I think if you're saying strategically and in terms of messaging, I think, yeah, there is definitely value in just being like, okay, bye. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the cheerleading aspect of it, yeah, I think that there's better ways and worse ways of responding to these things. And, I think that's a separate argument, right? That's like a messaging. And, but yeah, I think ultimately if it helps the issue sets that I'm promoting win, then I'm for it. If it doesn't, which you guys made, an argument that it might not, then I'm against it.
So you're not really concerned with like the precedent?
No, because like I say, the precedent's already been set. Like the bottom line is, the left has been shut out of the conversation on every major platform that exists.
Except for the ones that you're arguing for more censorship on. No,
I'm not arguing for more censorship. I'm saying like, I don't care. I just don't care for these things. I'm not arguing for more censorship. I'm happy to see them go, but I'm not, I'm not out there. Again, you'd be hard pressed.
What did you mean by saying that Spotify should be more responsible in the way they handle Joe Rogan? Like, what exactly were you advocating for?
I think corporations that do shit that harm the public should pay.
That's like every corporation, though. You could say that about McDonald's. Like, I mean,
I do. In fact, twice a year I go to Vegas to go to a tort conference where almost all the interviews I do are about actions that are taken based upon statutes, civil actions, to extract dollars out of companies that are doing stuff that harm the public. When Spotify is making money off of that, they are privatizing their profits and they are socializing the costs. And the cost of that, the costs are people are not getting vaccinated, people are not taking seriously a fucking pandemic, and we pay for that. We pay for that in lives, we pay for that in medical expenses, we pay for that in the elongation of the pandemic, and Spotify is just making money off it. So I'm coming for them.
I think that there is a clear distinction that it might be fruitful for us to lay out, because I actually agree with a lot of the points that you're making, Sam. I don't need to like pretend that I don't. I think that, yeah, they are basically, I mean, all of those, voices that we could name, the litany of right wingers that get millions and millions of views, they are also raking in a fuck ton of money for these companies. And they're doing so to, at the expense of all the people that are listening to them, essentially, for the most part. That's 100% true. And I don't believe that you have a fundamental right to make money or make a profit doing or articulating your viewpoint. However, I think that's a little bit different than just removing somebody from a website or a platform entirely, like removing somebody like Alex Jones from YouTube or Twitter, removing somebody like Andrew Tate or from YouTube or Twitter, something like that. I think that that's a little bit different. And so I feel like, I feel like you could make a more compelling middle ground here by saying that while you don't have a fundamental right to be paid for, your speech, you do have a right to make that speech and to acquire an audience. What do you think about that, Gavin?
Well, I mean, going back to the Joe Rogan thing, I mean, I agree that it's irresponsible. We said that at the time. Like I said, hey man, if you're not a doctor, like I personally wouldn't feel comfortable with giving people medical advice or telling them, not to take this medicine or not to take this vaccine. Like that's not my place. I understand that. I personally view it as being irresponsible. But at the same time, do I want to live in a world where people aren't allowed to have those conversations? I really don't. Like, I honestly think that's a nanny state. And I disagree with libertarians on a lot. But one thing that I think they are 100% right on is the fact that they don't want to live in a nanny state. And neither do I. I don't want, some corporation or the government telling me which viewpoints I'm allowed to be exposed to and which ones are too dangerous for me to hear. I personally, and I know a lot of people, are low IQ or whatever, but like I personally can understand when I'm listening to Joe Rogan what I should take from and what I should trust. And I can listen to Joe Rogan and just tune that out. And again, if you can't, then I don't know what to tell you, but I don't think it's the government or these corporations' job to protect you from like harmful viewpoints, especially when it comes to, questioning the medical consensus. And I'm not saying that we should just allow people to call for the genocide of the transgender community or whatever. But, if COVID was undeniably a big deal. Like culturally, it changed everyone's lives. The way everyone went about everything changed massively. To say that, this aspect of our life, we're not allowed to have conversations of, we're not allowed to question. And again, I'm fucking triple vax. Like I'm pro vax, all that stuff, but I still don't want to live in a world, especially a world. And I grew up when the internet, there's a lot, it was a lot less gentrified, the internet. There was a lot more unique spaces. It was a lot less, sanitized by corporations. And it seems like nowadays it's becoming less and less and less that. And maybe in some ways that's for the better. Again, if you're part of a marginalized community that's been historically harassed on these internet spaces, I'm sure that's great. But still, I do not want to live in a world where I can't have access to these viewpoints, where I can't have access to these conversations. And also, I think that for the people that really do, care about this stuff and really do believe these conspiracy theories, it's only going to confirm these conspiracies to them in their minds to see the people espousing said conspiracies censored. If suddenly Joe Rogan got censored, what do you think all the followers of him would say? They would say he's being censored because he's telling the truth. He's the only one out here that's spilling the beans. He's a whistleblower, and they're treating him.
Let me just stop you because that's the second argument, right? That it's not effective. All right, so let's just put that aside for a moment because I think that's debatable. I honestly do think that's debatable, and I think someone out there could do research to establish the reality of it. But the way it works with Spotify in that instance, okay, and Spotify without a doubt said something to Rogan. They said, do you really need to talk about, do you really need to espouse these theories? Because after all, Joe, you're just a fucking guy who wanted to get high with his friends on a podcast. You're not qualified to do this. This is not Spotify saying to a couple of epidemiologists who are discussing the different variants and who are qualified at this. My point is, Spotify is functioning as a publisher of, for whether we like it or not, news. Joe Rogan is news to people. Okay. Now you and I and Zach might be able to look at this and go, nah, I'm not so cool. I'm not sure. But the fact of the matter is, this is a big country. There's millions of people who, and Joe Rogan's like, I don't know why people are taking my advice. You're an idiot if you take my advice. Well, you know what? A lot of people took his advice, and he can determine whether they're idiots or not. But it's happening. It's existing. Like the argument on some level you're making is like, I had some libertarians say like, you should sell the Pinto when it explodes. You just sell it at a lower price. People know what they're getting. Like that doesn't work. And even if it was a situation where only Joe Rogan's listeners are going to suffer in that instance, which it's not, right? Because this is a society-wide problem, particularly a pandemic. Spotify, if they have, and I would get rid of, and certainly reform Section 230, okay? Spotify, if they know that they are responsible for the content they're putting out, And whatever standard you want to create, does material harm provable? And there are mechanisms in which to establish these things. We have that in tort law. If they are liable for it, civilly at the very least, in terms of like, you've got to pay damages. If there are half a dozen people out there, or a dozen, or 100, or 200, 500, or 1,000, or 10,000 who can come back and say, I got COVID, I wasn't vaccinated, or my father got COVID, he wasn't vaccinated because he was convinced that Joe Rogan was telling him what to do. I think someone should be able to bring an action against Spotify in that instance, because they've made millions of dollars off of specifically of Rogan. And so somebody has to be held to account. There is no standards here. And, FCC broadcasting has standards on which, you must apply to. I mean, and frankly, the cable stations are outside of that purview. But, like, I don't buy in the tort law that Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson can get away with saying, like, this is entertainment. People need to figure it out, that it's not real news. I think that's a problem. I think this shit should be actionable. You need to prove that there was at least due diligence done to establish what you're saying. But when I watch Joe Rogan go, like, with Zeps, right? That moment where he's with Zeps, where he's like, myocarditis. No, it hits people more from, this is a fact, right? Like, this is a knowable fact. And he's just sort of off the top of his head saying, the vaccinations give you myocarditis. And the fact is that, A, he doesn't know what myocarditis is.
Yep.
He doesn't know the incidence of myocarditis. He doesn't know that it's also higher with the COVID for all of the cohorts he's talking about. He's just misstating something, and he's been misstating that fact multiple times.
Right.
I think somebody has to be responsible, and particularly the corporation making millions off that shit. Millions. Somebody needs to be held responsible for the social harm that's caused.
So, Joe Rogan was not the first anti-vaxxer. Anti-vaxxer sentiments and, content has been around for as long as I've been alive.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Same with people in general that don't subscribe to modern medicine. People that say all modern medicine is bad. You should just meditate and, sit in the sunlight or whatever the hell they say. That's been a thing for a while. I just don't see why it's suddenly different now. Like, do I think those are good people?
I'm not talking about Rogan. I'm not talking about that individual you're talking about. I'm talking about this major corporation that is making money off it. If Joe Rogan was, saying this on his own platform, I would criticize him and say he's full of shit.
Well, that's fine to do. I think that's perfectly fine to criticize him for doing that.
But if he is doing it in service, he is an employee of Spotify, or he is subcontracted by Spotify.
But that's not why they hired him, to sow doubt about the vaccine. That just happened to be
they wanted whatever that mix is, that is bringing eyeballs to Spotify, or earballs, or whatever it is, to Spotify. That's what they wanted. And so they don't get to reap the profits for this to me is exactly like,
so any bad medical advice should be, prosecutable by law. Like, what if I ran a whole show talking about
malpractice?
Okay, well, let me give my example. What if I ran a whole show talking about how, Diet Coke is the best thing ever, even though chemicals in it are proven to be carcinogenic, and how you should do nothing but drink Diet Coke every day and eat McDonald's. And I was, giving people that advice. A lot of people are going to suffer health consequences down the line if they embrace that advice and embrace that diet. Does that mean that me or YouTube
if you were working for Spotify and you were wildly popular, and you were to argue that, let's make it more sort of realistic, right? Because Diet Coke, I don't think there's actually I don't know what harm you could get from drinking a lot of Diet Coke.
Carcinogenic chemicals. There's evidence directly linking it to cancer.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think that there should be warning labels on Coke if that's the case, and I think there should be action taken against Coke. not just you, I would also be suing Coke.
Well, what if
I
you run
could
a,
come up with
what if you're a tobacco,
who,
what if you're a tobacco enthusiast and you run a channel talking about like, oh, these are my favorite cigarettes, and you're advocating like smoking isn't actually so bad. Like that's obviously wrong and incorrect. It's factually it's probably harmful, but do I still think that that person should be allowed to exist to make that argument?
I'm not saying that person should be allowed to exist. You keep changing the terms of what I'm saying. I went on to Hayes' show and I said Spotify needs to be held to account. The corporation that is there, the people selling cigarettes, they were certainly held to account, without a doubt. There was billions of dollars of settlement associated with that. In fact, the law firm that I used to work with that puts on that tort conference was one of the ones that brokered the massive civil settlement that tobacco industries had to do. And yes, they were all held civilly liable for their promises about what tobacco could do.
We're talking about commentators, though. We're not talking about this company. Okay. I'm talking about commentators and their responsibility and their legal rights to engage in whatever sort of advocacy that they want to. I don't think it should be decided by what's in vogue as a problematic position.
Well, I think lying about spreading absolutely false things about myocarditis for profit, that corporation should be held responsible for the damage it's doing. You keep changing it as to like, I would silence Joe Rogan. I wouldn't silence Joe Rogan. I would say to Spotify, if you're going to make millions of dollars off this, you're going to pay civilly. I'm going to have statutes, and they're going to be actionable on a civil level, and people are going to bring suits based on those statutes, and we're going to extract, and it's going to be not profitable for you to do that. So that you're going to say to your employee, because they certainly give him other parameters, they pulled down a bunch of his, when he came over from independent, right, onto Spotify, they got rid of, I don't know how many part of his catalog, right? Where's the screams about that? They did that because it was in their best interest business-wise to do that. And I am saying that I think society should also make it in their best interest business-wise in terms of their bottom dollar to not socialize the costs of the bullshit that they are putting out there. That is dangerous in that respect.
Sam, now, can I just toss out perhaps another middle ground? It sounds like what you might be advocating for, Sam, to me is that like if Gavin were to host his show about all of his like favorite tobacco, right? We all know tobacco is harmful, right? But Gavin, with his ability to say whatever the fuck he wants, goes out there and says, I love tobacco, I think tobacco keeps me young, all these different things, right? Yeah. So is your argument that if he's going to be paid by a corporation to do that, then they need to at least say, like, disclaimer, science has shown that smoking kills, blah 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 blah, now on with the programming? Like, would that satisfy you? And then also, Gavin, I'm wondering if that would cross your threshold in what you view as your like libertarian, because I see what you're saying, Sam. I understand that we do hold corporations to account, and I have mixed feelings about the FCC. Right, I think you should be able to swear on your show. You can't swear if you're like on fucking FCC public broadcast. So there are problems with that, but I understand the concept behind it, right? Which was this idea that like we have to have some sort of that. People often ask why we have no public trust in the media. I think that having better regulations, exactly what you said about Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson, and how they're no longer allowed to get away with, in the courts presenting themselves as entertainment and in the public presenting themselves as news. I do think that there's a lot there for that. But I also, not to be the classic fence sitter, I also see like, yeah, I want to just fucking talk about whatever I want to. Like, I just literally sit in my house and I fucking talk. I
have no problem with Gavin saying, I feel that smoking keeps me young. I feel that, I'm going to live like my dad is 85 and he smoked, 2 packs a day. And so from my perspective, it doesn't hurt. But if you say, and studies show that smoking makes you live longer, and Gavin's getting paid by a corporation to distribute that information, then it's actionable.
What do you think about that?
Yes, Gavin? I would think, I mean, for me personally, if there was a disclaimer, as he's saying, this is Gavin's personal experience, the science is that actually smoking causes cancer, it increases your chance of getting cancer by 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever percent it is, then I would also be satisfied. But there was a scroll that underneath Joe Rogan at that moment where he said myocarditis, but it just so happens that we were all lucky that Josh Zepps was there and that Josh was smart about it.
And I think that's proof that arguing with these people rather than deplatforming them is the way to go, because a lot of people shared that.
9 times out of 10, Josh is not there, and for months, maybe a year and a half, he was making that claim.
Correct.
And so how many people didn't get the vaccine because of that? How many people told other people not to get the vaccine to get that? How many people caught COVID because of what he was expressing? How many people gave it to their grandfather who died? I mean, we don't know, but the number is greater than 0.
Right. Well, okay. First of all, I think you're framing this a little bit disingenuously when you say that Spotify specifically hired and is paying Joe Rogan to sow disinformation about myocarditis.
No, I didn't say that. I said they're profiting off it.
Okay. Well, you said they hired him to spread misinformation or whatever.
No. They are profiting off it. They hired him because he has eyeballs.
Right.
And Joe Rogan feels that he needs to wade into that shit to maintain the eyeballs. I don't think he does. But he wanted to, and they have the ability to check him. They just didn't feel like it was necessary to do that because the incentive structure is not there for them. And I would like to see government regulation to increase that incentive structure.
So you don't think so? But that doesn't exist right now. The reason why Spotify has not been sued because of what Joe Rogan said is because there's not actually a viable case to sue him for that. He's just expressing his First Amendment rights under this platform. And if he got censored by Spotify and deplatformed, he would have, within a day or two, taken all of his audience and all of his business over to Rumble or Gab, where there's going to be 10,000 other people saying the exact same line with no pushback, which is going to only increase those companies and those platforms in size, as well as continually to radicalize himself and his audience in the process.
If you said that shit on Rumble or Gab, I would sue them too if that law existed.
But that law doesn't exist. So why are we talking about these hypotheticals instead of the situation as it is?
Because you brought up what I said on Hayes' show, and I'm explaining to you that Spotify needs to be held to account. And I think that we need to have laws that in that situation would hold Spotify to account. I'm not convinced that there couldn't have been an action taken. I'm not convinced. I don't know. Maybe there's a lawyer out there who could have come up with, but there's a lot of protection for these publishing sites under specifically Section 230, but broadly speaking, that larger act that deals with the internet. And yes, I would want some type of statutory reform for that. That's what I advocate for.
Okay, well, again, I mean, that's not how it currently is. That's not how it currently operates. And
I know, but you brought up me on Hayes, and when I said I want Spotify to be held to account, I wanted them to be held to account both. I would like there to be statutory, and I would like there also to be just public shaming of a corporation that does that.
The platform you were on when you made that argument should also be sued for spreading misinformation. You don't think they helped manufacture consent for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan at the time? You don't think that they've spread misinformation on their show?
I agree. Well, I mean, I was screaming about that at the time. The one person on that network who was even questioning the war, Phil Donahue, got fired. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the reason why I continue to go on MSNBC is founded in that very reason.
Well, because I don't think it should be illegal to have those viewpoints either. I don't think you should be able to be sued for making a pro-war argument either. I think I should argue with that and dispel it.
That's different. That's different. How? Making a pro-war argument is different than spreading misinformation.
You think manufacturing consent for an illegal war that resulted in far more deaths than COVID?
No, I know exactly what happened with Iraq. But you just said arguing for war, we should go and liberate the Iraqi people, is different than saying they have weapons of mass destruction. That was the lie.
Right. But you could still say there's direct harm as a result of people manufacturing consent for these wars, whether it's by spreading, provable disinformation or just by stating their opinion that, yes, we should go liberate the Iraqis. A lot of people died because of that. And I still think it's an opinion you should be allowed to have.
I think that there is a line between a demonstrable lie, which we clearly demonstrated, and there were weapons inspectors on the ground basically begging the CIA, tell us where these weapons are that you keep saying are here, because we've searched all the locations you've given us and there's no evidence of it there. But then rather than, and I'm against all of it, understand. I mean, I was very, very public about being against the war. I mean, to the extent that I could be. And arguing we need to go and liberate the Iraqi people. Those are because they deserve it. I mean, let's just,
okay, well, what if Joe Rogan really believes what he says? And I'm not saying he does. I don't know who he is, but like, what if he's genuinely convinced
a corporation has a responsibility to make sure that the host of that, whoever is talking this has done due diligence to check it out. Joe Rogan did no diligence, nothing, zero.
Well, he would tell you he did. He would say, I've had on this Dr. Malone or whatever, and I've talked to these serious people. I have done my diligence. I've just arrived to a different conclusion. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not defending Joe Rogan. I think what he did was very irresponsible.
I don't think he did, dude. I would argue having Dr. Malone
you should just you should just decide everyone who gets to be deplatformed, and that should be the line, like what you think is due diligence.
Well, I think due diligence, you need to demonstrate. When I say something that has medical relevance, I cite this.
He does the same thing, just with kook doctors, though.
Well, I mean, I think the bottom line is you've got to go to reputable sources. I mean, this happens in journalism too. They don't necessarily follow it all the time, and they should. But I think, like, there are mechanisms every day. There are tort cases where these lines as to what crosses a threshold is established by a court.
Sure.
Right? Like, what is the reasonable standard expected?
What about climate change? You could find a handful of kook doctors to tell you that climate change isn't really happening, and I could do a whole show where I talk about that.
The attorney generals of multiple states have been trying to sue Exxon for funding
That's not
climate denial when they knew.
Can I jump in here, guys?
Spotify isn't funding COVID denial. It just happens to be that one of their hosts is engaging in it.
Because I think one of the things here that I just feel like we're all like kind of getting all fucking around here. The question that I think I'm trying to find out, at least here, Sam, in the absence of this law that you're talking about, right? In the absence of this, actual prosecutable offense to Spotify, right? In the absence of that, right? So we talked about how
prosecutable, but yeah, go ahead.
Or whatever it is, financial, whatever penalty, some kind of penal action for the commentary that was given by one of their independent contractors. In the absence of that, do you think Rogan gets to are you okay with him staying on doing his show, right? You don't want to remove Rogan from the air at all. In the absence of this law that you'd like to see developed, you're not advocating for the removal of Joe Rogan, right?
No, in particular, Joe Rogan, I just think is, in over his head. On some things. And if he doesn't have the ability to assess that, then there has to be people around him who, have parameters with the one incentive structure they have, which is money.
Right, but you brought up Exxon funding climate denialism, and I just think that's a little bit different. If Spotify was directly paying Joe to sow disinformation and to convince people not to take the vaccine, I would actually agree with you. In the same way I've made the argument about like tankies that make pro Putin, pro Russia arguments. I say, if someone found out that this person or this organization was literally being funded by Russia to make these arguments, yeah, I think you have more of a case to deplatform that person because they're literally just a propagandist at that point. But in the absence of that evidence, if someone has just come to these conclusions for whatever, crazy reasons they've decided, no, I think that should still be a permissible opinion to express, in the same way that as long as, ivermectin isn't paying you to be anti-vax, if that's the conclusion you've reached, then I still think you should be able to have have that conversation, even if you are a big content creator. I think to censor it or to, deplatform it is only going to increase the conspiratorial kind of feelings from that audience in the first place. The same thing goes with climate denialism. Again, if you're literally being paid by Exxon to spread climate denialism, that's one thing. But if you're just stupid and have decided that climate change isn't happening and you want to make that your viewpoint as a commentator, I think that should be allowed, even if it's unproductive, even if it's dangerous. Like, I don't want to live in a nanny state.
Well, I mean, the nanny state thing is a different argument. But if you're arguing that you're going to make people, excuse me, more conspiratorial, and that's going to have more harm, to limit their access to this information, and you can prove that to me, then I would agree with you. But I can tell you, for decades, there was absolutely no action taken by the many entities on the right that were funded to spread climate denialism in this country, to the detriment of everyone.
But that's different.
Like, well, is it though? I mean, it was profitable, and people are profiting off of the climate denialism.
I think there's a difference between being a paid propagandist and coming to an incorrect conclusion in good faith, because people do that all the time.
Well, I agree in terms of coming to an incorrect conclusion in good faith, but I don't believe that it is just a question of intent. I think that we need to be able to measure what rigor are you providing when in specific areas that can cause material harm to people. What rigor are you providing to ensure that you are disseminating the most accurate information you can? And again, we get back to Spotify, because that's the issue for me. I mean, if you want to give me other specific examples.
Well, let's talk about Alex Jones, because he actually was found to be in violation of a law. He actually was found to be defamatory towards the victims of Sandy Hook. In that case, if then YouTube wants to say, look, you're now a provable libelous defamer, you've committed a crime, you've broke the law, we don't want to have anything to do with you. I think there's more of a case for that. I don't think
without doubt, of course.
But until he was proved that he did engage in defamation, which people like Joe Rogan, for example, have not, I don't think it was a wise decision to just give him the internet death penalty.
Well, it could be a wise decision. It could be an unwise decision because it increased his visibility. I mean, that's one of the arguments you're making, which I think is debatable. And if you were to show me evidence in one instance versus another, I would say, like, okay, yeah, whichever one provides him with less viewership, I'm for. But the problem with using the defamation standard, right, that it needs to be proved in a court of law before YouTube takes action. And again, like, I happen to think that it gives him less viewers, and so that's why I'm in favor of it. But I would if because it's all like, our cheerleading is irrelevant, right? You can argue that our cheerleading is a bad political strategy, but in terms of what YouTube is going to do, it's irrelevant, right? Anything else, like us saying YouTube should not should only deplatform in these circumstances, that's just as hypothetical as my situation where the government comes in and exercises antitrust and makes YouTube largely no more relevant than, 2 Gabs or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, there's actual room for competitors. And so that getting deplatformed from one place or another doesn't have the consequences that, people are concerned about. But in the world that we live in, yeah, like I think using defamation as the only standard means that you're required to have a case that is like going to be lucrative, and it's going to take years, and it's got to be, you got to find a lawyer, and then it just becomes in many respects like, how much time and money do you have to dedicate towards this? So, like, I think all the damage that Alex Jones was doing, he was doing for those many years. I mean, that was 10 years ago that we're talking about. And so that seems like a little bit of a lag, for something that is clearly he's full of shit.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, like the idea
one
they're
thing,
crisis actors.
one thing I would agree with you more on, Sam, and I imagine you share this opinion, is I do think there's an undeniable promotion, at least algorithmically, especially on YouTube, of right-wing content. I think that that's a for sure problem.
Without
I
a
mean,
doubt.
even if you watch,
And they have more money to promote.
yes,
I mean,
no,
fucking
here, one
Ben
sec, let me
Shapiro
finish.
spent
I know.
millions
And
on
if you
Facebook.
watch even if you watch a left-wing show like the Vanguard, you know, I'll sometimes put on our videos to make sure that, you know, that we didn't make any mistakes in the editing. And then after the video done playing, what does it autoplay?
Matt Walsh.
It plays Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan 9 times out of 10. Even though I don't watch Jordan Peterson content, I barely watch Joe Rogan content, but it still algorithmically promotes it. So I agree it's a problem. I think if anything, we should, you know, try to enforce some regulation as far as the algorithm goes to prevent these
Absolutely.
viewpoints.
Totally agree.
But do I think it's a good idea for the left? And again, you can say this isn't true, but I think it's undeniable that this is how a lot of people do perceive the left, is that we are perceived oftentimes by just normie people as censorious, petty authoritarians, pearl clutchers, and we don't think people should be allowed to engage with the content that they want because it's a problematic or dangerous viewpoint. And again, putting aside everything else, I think that that's undeniably a terrible, terrible face for the left, a terrible look for the left. I think it turns people off. I think in the run up to 2016, this is one of the big reasons why Donald Trump was able to win, is because there was a sentiment, and you can say it was ginned up, but there was a sentiment that the left is censorious. They want to, you know, cancel these speakers on the college campus because they can't engage with their ideas. All they want to do is cancel everyone. I think that, you know, for the amount that we can control that narrative, we should try not to lean into it. We should try not to make those arguments for the right.
I would dispute your assessment of how that's perceived. I think that's probably more a function of, in terms of like the way that normies view the left as doing that. I would argue that if you were to take a poll as to whether YouTube should have banned Alex Jones or not, I would suspect that overwhelmingly people would approve of his banning. That's my guess. I don't know if you have data to, you know, to back up the notion that, broadly speaking, normies perceive the left as being censorious. I would like to see that, because the fact of the matter is,
I think that.
Okay.
I think that the left is censorious. In the last year or so alone, I've seen the left.
If you look at what's going on in school districts around the country, that if you want to talk about real censorship,
and I talk about that too.
I understand, but real First Amendment stuff, and you're making a value judgment that the left is, as opposed to whom?
I didn't say that.
Okay, well, I mean, then everybody's censorious, and everybody's authoritarian, and so.
And I'm saying we should try our best not to feed into that. Why would we? Just because they are too doesn't mean we should be. I think we should present.
I think that there's an argument that you should quietly celebrate when Alex Jones gets deplatformed.
Well, like I said,
you
Sam,
should quietly celebrate when Dave Rubin gets deplatformed. I think there's an argument for that.
I think what it really comes down to, though, is it's a matter of who does a better job at messaging, right? And so who does a better job of making it look like the crazy censorious moving on? Who does a better job at marketing that? And I think that we
the team with the multi millions coming from folks like Peter Thiel.
The Democrats have a fuck ton of money too, man, and it doesn't help that.
This is not Democrats. Not Democrats or Republicans.
Please, can I get in here for just 1 second? It doesn't help our team, right? If we are battling a multi, no doubt about it, the Republicans have a shit ton of money. They have all the billionaires and all the oligarchs supporting them, right? Well, it seems to me, and I think it seems to Gavin as well, that we are hurting ourselves by basically just continuing to add to that, you know, ruckus, right? Of saying, oh, yes, you want us to look like the censorious people. We are going to tell you both that you are that real censorious one, but also that we support censorship. So it just seems to me that it's a more clear through line to the average voter, where it's like, yeah, I want to be able to say whatever I want. I don't think that you should be, you know, kicked off of for saying X, Y, and Z, right? But I also God, fuck me. Yeah. I
no,
think
but Zach, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you really think the average voter gives a shit about anything that we have talked about today?
Yeah, I
Because
actually do, man. Look, and I'll give the perspective of Middle America, Sam. I know you probably have a better read of what's going on in more urban areas. I'll give you that. But Gavin and I are both raised in the Midwest, right? I was born and grew up in Olathe, or I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, but I grew up in Olathe, Kansas, right? And we just had a big vote in Kansas about abortion rights, right? And I think that if we'd had this conversation 6 months ago, you probably would have thought that a lot of people in Kansas would have voted to outlaw abortion. Maybe I won't say that for sure. I thought a lot of people in Kansas were going to vote to outlaw abortion. I was really fucking nervous about it. Gavin and I were fucking anguishing about that for a while. But they came out, and even guys like my dad, who's voted Republican down the ballot his entire fucking life, came out and said, this is a freedom issue. Okay.
Right.
This is a freedom issue. And I think all across the Midwest, the Middle America, what cuts through the court as a freedom issue is something like the freedom of speech, right? It is something that, fuck it all. You lost your house. You don't have a job at a factory anymore. You're getting paid $10 an hour to work a forklift at a dog food factory. But what do you have, right? I have the right that my government's not going to impose tyranny on me. I'm not saying that that's a reality, but this is a deeply held belief that a lot of the people that I interact with day to day, they really believe that shit. The other thing is that I can say what the fuck I want. And we need desperately, as a left, these middle American people to say, oh yeah, and I also won't take shit from my boss anymore. And if they add that as a value, and I'm going to fucking stand up for my neighbor regardless of who they are, then we really have a movement. And that's what made Bernie Sanders so powerful, right? Was that he was able to reach these kinds of voters who had never voted Democrat in their entire life, never ended up voting Democrat. Fuck all if they could vote in the primary, but they liked him, right? You know what I mean? And it's because he touched on all those primal issues, and he was like, the people that are around in here, they do care about loving their neighbor. It's just, you got to remember that it's all of their neighbors. You got to kind of give them a kick in the ass sometimes when it comes to things like that. They hold that free speech ethic like so close to them. So that's why I do think it is a little bit of a misnomer to say, do you think people give a fuck about it? Like, they really fucking do, man. And I know that there's a trade-off, right? I wasn't trying to take a shot at you for living in New York City, Gavin.
No,
I
I
would love to
understand.
live there.
I mean,
you know what I mean? There's definitely more of a focus in New York City for something like, I care more about the LGBTQ plus community, right? I have Black Lives Matter solidarity. We could work on that way fucking more in the Midwest. There are good people here, but we could work on that way more. On the flip side, here, if you want to reach people here, you got to talk about their inalienable right to like free speech and their sovereignty, and that's what, and those people, that's,
I understand, and that's the way the abortion issue was framed. I've watched half a dozen commercials that framed it exactly like that. And just so you know, I mean, I've lived for almost a decade in a very rural area where my neighbors in 2008, I went into his wood shop, and he had 500 signs as they were going out to paint the town Ron for Ron Paul's run. And every single one of my neighbors had some type of firearm, ranging from handguns that with the registration scratched off, AR-15, her shotgun where the butt adjusts depending on who's going to be using it at whatever instance that was going to be used, 22s, I mean, the whole thing. Yes, I mean, I understand that dynamic, and I agree with you that that democratic messaging, but I also can tell you that, like, if I was to say to them, like, I'm going on the Vanguard, or I'm going on, to the Majority Report, or, and, what do you call it? Alex Jones got deplatformed. They'd be like, well, okay, it's, a problem or not a problem. Like, it's just.
But they would say the same thing about the problem that you identified, which is him spreading misinformation. You think people in Middle America give a fuck about Joe Rogan giving his opinion about the vaccine? That's not at the top of their list at all.
No, I'm not saying that you do it for electoral reasons. I'm saying you do it so that those people don't get the idea that the vaccine is going to give you a disease that it's not going to give you.
But we let people engage in all kinds of harmful behaviors.
It's not an electoral issue.
Again, we let people engage in all kinds of harmful behaviors. It's your legal right to go smoke a pack of cigarettes and get addicted to that. Like,
but there's at least a warning on the bottom.
Okay, well, if you want to say that maybe they should put a little a warning or whatever,
Yeah,
that's a different issue.
if there's a scrawl underneath Joe Rogan when he's saying this gives you myocarditis, and it says, in fact, it does not give you myocarditis at a rate greater, I would be more than happy for that.
Yeah. Well, what do you
I
think
would
about that?
love that.
Yeah. Well, I think we've reached a pretty good point of consensus, Sam, and we really appreciate the conversation. The last thing I'll say is just that I would, in my ideal world, I want to see the left embrace the First Amendment like the right embraces the Second Amendment. I think we should go back to those old school ACLU principles where, if you believe in free speech, then you believe in free speech for your worst enemy. I think that's a good look for the left. I think it actually provides a nice contrast with the right who pretends to be pro-freedom, who pretends to be anti-tyranny, and say, no, we're actually the ones that care about this stuff. And you can do or say what you want. And I think that would actually be massively appealing to people, massively appealing to a lot of people that have this idea in their mind that, yeah, the left are a bunch of hand wringers and pearl clutchers and petty authoritarians. And, that's what I would like to see. But I definitely understand a lot of the points that you made too, Sam. And, I think we agree on a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not as convinced that that there is. I'm not as convinced that I think messaging can always be improved, and that's a different aspect. Like I think the example of the abortion in Kansas is a good one. I just think that again, if you're making a practical sort of material argument as to there are less right wingers if you keep Alex Jones on, or less, conspiracy theorist if you keep Alex Jones on YouTube versus if you take him off, then I would have no problem with that. As it stands now. Again, to the extent that I think there's a problem with what we call the censoring, I think the only real feasible way of doing it, actually practically doing what you're talking about, is to lower the stakes of getting booted off any given platform. There should not be the type of concentration. And I think the algorithm thing is I wouldn't even allow Netflix necessarily to have an algorithm that feeds you shit that you want. Like I would go pretty far with outlawing a lot of algorithms, because I think that they get used in very nefarious ways that end up hurting society. This is one of them, but other ways that I think are very problematic. But
yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. The algorithm is completely fucked, and I would like to see it manipulated in a lot of ways, or just publicly regulated in a way that is far more transparent and less esoteric and shadowy than it is now, for sure. Sam, really appreciate you taking an hour
Thanks
out
for
of
having
your
me on, guys.
Labor Day weekend. Appreciate it.
All right, it was fun.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your weekend, bro.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. I thought it was really productive. I don't know what you guys thought in chat. I haven't really been paying attention, but that hour and a half went by pretty quick to me.
Yeah, it was a good chat. Pretty much usual notes. Zach didn't talk enough. Gavin did a good job.
I thought you made an amazing point at the end about the kind of people that we interact with, in the middle of the country, and the fact that this actually is an issue. A lot of Republicans in specific, the reason why they're Republican isn't even because they support Republican policies. It's because they think that Republicans are the pro-freedom party, that they're the ones that are going to stand up for their freedom and their liberty, and they get duped into voting for these fascists. So I think it's a good idea to prevent a counter and an alternative to that, and say, no, actually, we're the ones that are in favor of free speech. We're the ones that are in favor of freedom. In my opinion, optically, at least, that's by far the best way to go about it. And honestly, any other thing or any other approach, I think it truly does open up a slippery slope to just, well, I'm going to deplatform everyone. All right wingers get the death penalty on the internet. And I don't think that's I mean, even if that means that less harmful ideologies spread, I think that that's generally antithetical to my understanding of upholding the principle of the First Amendment, right? I don't think that we can just go down the slippery slope of banning everyone that we disagree with. And not to, obviously Sam's not here anymore, but I do think that's kind of, essentially what he was arguing for, at least at the end there. But anyway, still a great conversation.
To fortify Sam's argument a little bit, I think that the crux of what he was saying that I'm sympathetic to, at least, is that, if you do look at the media landscape, and this would be at least my most charitable reading of what he was trying to say, is if you look at the media landscape, right, and you see the fact that Tucker Carlson and Rachel Maddow are making a bunch of money for these corporations, and they're saying that it's entertainment, and it's not, it's something different. And then you look at Spotify, and they're making all this money, and they're profiting off of things that could potentially harm people. And then you look at how we've dealt with that throughout American history. We've had things like FCC broadcast regulations. We've had things like mechanisms through, like, if you're going to publish something in a magazine, you can be accused of libel and slander. I think that it would be something that we could probably all agree on, that if there was a public referendum that people voted on, like, here are the guidelines that we want our free speech to follow through. I think that you would have a lot more public support for it than just picking and choosing your political enemies and giving them the axe. I know you're wincing, but I do think that politically, at least in polling, it would be a way better do you think that we should have FCC era rulings apply now to more modern content, now that the public square and the foreground of ideas, like I said, I have a bunch of issues with the way that the FCC rulings existed in the past, but I do think that you would get more public support for it than necessarily if you frame it as, like, do you want to just start randomly selectively, like, banning people from the internet, just to give Sam the full extent of his I think I fall somewhere in the middle of you guys. I'm not, like, massively opposed to, like, disclaimers if somebody's fucking lying to people for money, and you can prove it.
Under the FCC guidelines that currently exist under cable television, they don't have those labels when people do espouse and profit in misinformation. Like, happens all the time on cable news. What do you think it's basically a propaganda
Well, that's because
arm.
the main crux of all of the legislation that was what fortified the FCC expired like 25 years ago, and that's why we saw the rise in media cable television, and that's why I said I have a lot of problems with the way the FCC is written. But if you did give it a toothsome, real integrity to it and made it public and transparent, and it was buy-in of the will of the people, then I think you would have much more public support for it. Because yeah, you're right. As it stands now, it's fucking empty waiver that says you can't swear when you're driving in the car. Like, or when you're on public radio. Like, that's just horseshit. Nobody cares about that. But what they do care about is, like, we're presenting ourselves as a news show, and really we're just lying to you to satisfy any dopamine receptors in your system. And I think things like that would be something that people would want to know about. I think that I think people do want to know if there's a warning label on their cigarettes. Like, that's nanny state. And yeah, we could disagree about the merits of that, but I think that if you polled people about that kind of thing, it would do much better than if you just said, like, oh, this person's getting deplatformed for no reason. It would be like, no, they violated this rule that the public voted on. Now, we would then have many heated debates about what the public should regulate and to what extent the public should regulate it. But I just think if any regulation is going to be done by anybody, it should be done by the people and not the government and not the corporation. So
Yeah, I mean, I still disagree with that. I don't think if you're talking about, like, I mean, what about conspiracy theories? What about JFK? Do you think there should be a warning label scrolling beneath you saying this isn't technically, proven to be fact, or like any other number of issues which might not be considered 100% factual necessarily? I still think we should be able to engage in those conversations.
Yeah, did you ever watch the show Jackass? They have to tell everybody that you can't engage in those harmful activities, but everybody still loved it and watched it, and it became a cultural phenomenon. Like, I don't think that just because you have that. I mean, I guess so, but I mean, it's like, do not try this at home. Like, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a difference between conspiracy theory and conjecture and things that are verifiably documented to be false, right? Like, that's why the entire age of print, when print was what dominated this entire country, what Noam Chomsky refers to as the freest period of the American press, from the late 1800s and into the mid 20th century. They had a fuck ton of laws about what you could print in a newspaper because people wanted to know that what they were fucking getting was legit. And I don't think it's a fucking shocker that after we repealed all those laws to make it way more fucking salient to people to sell more newspapers, that public trust in the media went like this, because there were no longer any kind of guidelines or framework, and people could sell you a bunch of hocus pocus. Now, I get where you're coming from, because I have the same job as you. We all want to be able to sit back and talk shit and not have any fucking responsibilities about it. But I think at some point you have to be able to say, like, we're not working for a news network. We are 100% independent, and which is why I think it's different in the point that Sam was making from the Spotify agreement. We don't have a contract with anybody. You know what I'm saying? But you're giving me a weird look. What are you beefing on?
Well, I just don't understand how that applies to the conversation, because Joe Rogan's not necessarily presenting himself as a newscaster. He is just presenting himself as a dude bro having conversation. So I don't necessarily think that, like, regulating that is in the best interest of anyone. I think that's just a function of a censorious nanny state. And again, it's always going to come back around to bite the left in the ass. They could say that, oh, well, if we're talking about how we should stop funding Israel or something. There's a bunch of controversial opinions that aren't permissible in the mainstream dialogue that I absolutely want to be able to engage in without being labeled a merchant of disinformation or someone that's engaging in problematic viewpoints. Like, I think the whole point of the internet, the best thing about the internet, was that it provided an alternative to exactly the sort of regulatory nanny state bullshit that you're outlining, Zach. Like, the whole great thing about the internet is that you could have access to these kind of conversations that, by the way, you can have access to with your friends down the street, at the coffee shop, anywhere in public. I don't think that there's almost any regulations of the sort you're talking about that would be beneficial to internet discourse and content creation, at least not from a free speech absolutist perspective, which I do hold.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really reductive of a way of framing my argument, actually, because what I was saying was that there is a difference in saying something that is verifiably false, okay, on a fucking platform that you've been paid $100 million to have. That's just different than like speculating and conjecture about the examples that you used. If I am saying, like, like we used the example during the discussion, like if I say that smoking makes me younger, right? And I say all of these different things, like it is 100% you're right. I also think it's the right of that the company, like, essentially what it comes down to is it comes down to simping for corporations, right, to fucking profit off of people. I mean, that would be my uncharitable interpretation of what you're saying.
So you think that if someone's doing a show where they want to promote tobacco products and talk about how they personally like to drink cocktails, that there should be a thing at the bottom of the screen that says, by the way, alcohol is bad for you. You shouldn't drink it.
I think that based on laws that a shit ton of people would support, if there was a show that was 100% rooted in scientific inaccuracies, the common current standard would be to say, like, that these views are, not.
You think that should be the case? Rigor. You think if you do a show where you say, I like to drink alcohol and this is me making cocktails, that there should be a thing at the bottom of the screen that says alcohol is bad for you?
I think that makes it extremely reductive, because that's not the same thing as me saying, like, yeah, you should take this medication. It's really good. It's going to help you, like, fucking get X, Y, and Z results, which I do think should be fucking illegal. Like, I don't think you should be able to go up on a show and say, hey, buy this cup of coffee. It's going to make you 3 feet taller. It's going to, give you wings. It's actually illegal to do that. You cannot sell a product in this country and have it not be the.
No one's selling a product, though. Like I said, if Joe Rogan
isn't a product,
if I was being paid by Big Tobacco to make those arguments, then I would agree with you. Or if Joe Rogan was being paid by ivermectin to make those arguments, I would agree with you. But I'm not, and obviously I'm not making those arguments. And Joe Rogan wasn't being paid by anyone to make those arguments. That was just his opinion, even though I disagree with it.
Well, Spotify paid Joe Rogan to make those comments, and Spotify's a publicly traded. You can't say that for sure, though. You can't say that the same money that's making money off of. You can't.
They didn't pay him for any specific viewpoint. They paid him for his show, and he was doing his show, and that was his opinion.
But you said that it's different than if you're profiting off of, like, me. If I'm doing a show where you think that the same, but
we're all profiting off of all of our viewpoints. That's the whole, like, point of being an online internet commentator as your job, is to you make money espousing what you believe, your opinions. Everyone's profiting.
Yes, I understand that, and I think that there does be, not that you don't have the right to, right? This is where we disagree. I think is that it doesn't come down to your right to say it and your right to have a platform, but it does come down to, do you have a right to enrich shareholders by doing this? That's something that I think about. In the same way that, what you're giving me like a fucking condescending look. I don't know.
I'm not trying to give you a condescending look. I just don't really agree with the argument you're making. Sorry, I'm not trying to be rude or anything. I just think it's crazy to say that if you have a viewpoint that's against the mainstream public opinion on any certain issue.
I said verifiably false, not against the mainstream public opinion.
I think you should be allowed to say things that are verifiably false. People do that all the fucking time. Literally, that happens on the mainstream media on a daily basis. I can turn on CNN or Fox News right now.
Should be a problem. That was the whole crux of my argument.
So you think that those shows should all have a thing at the bottom of the screen saying, actually, the objective reality is this, and this opinion commentator is being wrong?
I think that if you dress up your show as a fucking news show and you've argued in a court of law that it's entertainment, yeah, it's the right of the people to know, yeah, hey, this is an entertainment fucking show. It straight up is. Like, the right, the people have a right to know what it is. It's
so should we have one of those at the bottom of our screen saying these people are opinion commentators and everything they're saying isn't necessarily true? Like, people know that. Why would we infantilize our audience?
Law. No, Gavin, because we haven't been convicted in a court of law saying that we're fucking duping people. That's what happened to Rachel Maddow. That's what happened to Tucker Carlson. They were convicted, and I'm saying, yes, if that's happened, they literally were.
I'm not talking about those people though. I'm talking about online content creators and commentators. That's what this whole conversation has been about.
No, Spotify is not online commentators. It is a fucking corporation, and that's why I think it's more comparable to.
So is YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all these
Who
companies
paid
that
us
we exist
$100
on.
million to do this? No, YouTube doesn't. When was the last time YouTube paid somebody $100 million to come to their fucking platform?
I mean, we all make money on YouTube. We're monetizing our content. If our content blew up, we could also make that much money.
That not get no, Spotify paid Joe Rogan to be an independent contractor. That would be like if we signed a deal with Twitch to be like exclusive Twitch streamers. We've never done that, right? We never have done that. And what I'm saying is that, yeah, if you're a fucking corporation that is making this content, I think that there is some merit to that. I think that there is some merit to that. If you are like, in the same way that we said that Alex Jones should be able to be fucking sued for his content, like he said that, oh, like he's not marketing a product, he's just saying that fucking Sandy Hook didn't happen, right? Like, oh, shouldn't you be allowed to say that? Isn't that just like JFK? Like, shouldn't you be allowed to say that there were crisis actors and all that shit? Like,
until he got proved of defamation, yeah, I do think that was his right to speculate. I don't think that should be illegal.
Why are you pretending that I haven't every single time I've advocated for one of these things brought up a legal basis for it? You said until the law was changed. That's why I said with Fox News, with Tucker Carlson, with Rachel Maddow.
We're talking about Joe Rogan, though. You're talking about random people that have nothing to do with this.
I'm telling you that that I think that if you are if Joe Rogan goes up there and says something that is verifiably false to his audience, that, yeah, I think he should be subject to the same rigor as Alex Jones. And yeah, I think that there's some merit to the fact that when Sam said that it shouldn't take 10 fucking years for our court system to deal with a guy like Alex Jones, who said something that's super easy to verify as false, like that might be a problem. Like, I don't want to be so rigid in my fucking analysis here that I have to fucking pretend that everybody has a bare bones argument. Okay. I think that, yeah, we need to prioritize freedom of speech. But if you can verify that something is not fucking true 100%, and you still go out there and peddle it every single day, like, yeah, I think a lawsuit might be in order. I don't think that.
But some things, I mean, the truth changes. Like, what about? And again, I'm not someone that defended Joe Rogan and his views on the vaccine, but there have been faulty vaccines in the past. When the polio vaccine was rolled out, for example, those did harm a lot of people. There were adverse effects from them. Do you not think people should have been able to talk about that at the time without being labeled misinformation?
No, but I'm not saying that they shouldn't be labeled misinformation, but I'm saying that if you come out and you're saying that, like, oh yeah, ivermectin cures COVID, and we've got like a fucking 10, like, and you're making a shit ton of money off of that, then you run in the risk of getting a lawsuit. Just like if you fucking sell a product that tells somebody that they don't have.
I'm not saying if someone wants to try to sue him, they can. Obviously, it's your right to try to sue anyone you want. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to try to sue
that was
people.
All I was arguing.
You said that there should be little things at the bottom of the screen that say this is disinformation.
I think that is like an example of what the FCC could do if we had a more toothsome FCC.
So what do you argue? What do you even disagree with me on then?
I'm just saying that I don't know, actually. All I'm saying is that I do think that, if you do something illegal, then you should be able to
Well, do you agree with Sam Seder that Joe Rogan and Spotify were doing something that should be considered illegal? Because he was arguing we should open up the laws in order to be able to sue a company like Spotify for profiting off of what he deemed to be misinformation. I think that's a terrible precedent to set. I think that's going to end up coming after all of us that dabble in opinion commentary. I think that you could make a case for that on just about any grounds, and I think that's a ridiculous standard. I think it's anti-free speech.
Well, I think that's an interesting position to have. Do you think that all newspapers from the entirety of the 20th century were anti-free speech, Gavin? I understand your fear. I hold the fear that this will all come back and rain down on us. But I also understand that most people don't give a fuck about what happens to independent contractors on the internet and commentators on the internet.
Just by telling you just made a beautiful point at the end of our debate about how people do care about that.
No, I'm talking about what happens to us. I'm saying nobody cares about what happens to me in particular. Not that people don't care about free speech. That was what I made a point about at the end of our fucking pot.
And I'll defend your right to free speech because I care about the principle. I don't care what other people think about you and your free speech. I defend the principle of the First Amendment and free speech, which I believe deeply in.
Yes, but you were telling me that you can't have any kind of regulation and still have free speech. I'm telling you there's an ample regulation that provided the golden era of journalism in this country, that provided the golden era of trust.
We're not talking about journalism. We're talking about opinion commentary online.
Editorialism is journalism, Gavin.
I don't think that opinion commentators that's job is to have dude bro conversations with one another should be held to the same standards as journalists that are presenting facts. And even journalists, you can find journalists that are reporting on, like, the climate change denialists. Those are journalists. Those are scientists. Are they incorrect? Yes. Do they have the right to give their viewpoint? Yes.
I'm not saying they don't have the right to give their viewpoint. All I was saying is that if you can verify that what they're saying is 100% wrong, then you have the right to sue them for it. That was the bedrock of my fucking analysis.
Well, that's an argument that I made to Sam Seder. That's why I said I'm okay with Alex Jones being found guilty in a court of law. I think that's a lot different than a bunch of social media oligarchs getting together and deciding to, scrub someone and disappear them from the internet.
Yeah, that's why I made the whole point about how I don't think it should be the fucking government or the oligarchs and the corporations that oversee any kind of regulation that we have. It should be the actual people. That was legitimately what I said.
Okay, well, all I'm saying is I do not think that giant social media companies should be deciding what is true and what is not. I don't think that Twitter or YouTube should be putting notices under certain content that says this is not trustworthy. Here, check out the Wikipedia article to find out more. Like, no, I don't think that's the right way to go about this. I think that people should be able to engage in a marketplace of ideas that reflects the broad spectrum of human opinion and experience and decide what they want to listen to. I think that people have every right to engage in misinformation. I think people have every right to engage in content that's not 100% true, that's a matter of opinion. I mean, again, I like watching content about conspiracy theories. You don't think a lot of that stuff is kind of bullshit? Of course it is. Do you think there should be a thing at the bottom of the screen that says so? No.
If they're convicted in a court of law that says that they are, then yeah, I do think that if you want to keep making that content, you have to put a little thingy at the bar. That was what I was saying. If you are convicted and you want to keep putting out that content, yeah, I think you should have to put a disclaimer there.
Okay, well, like I said, I agreed with that, which is why I said that Alex Jones is a difference because he was found guilty of
Tucker and
defamation.
Rachel Maddow. That's why I was saying that.
And they're on the news. They're not online independent contractors. If Tucker Carlson, do I think all of his tweets should have a thing under it that says this man has been convicted of whatever the fuck he was convicted? No.
No, but I think his news show definitely should. I think that at least, I think that if you want to continue broadcasting it as a news show after you've been fucking publicly, like Fox News at night where we announce the news, I think that's false advertisement on any grounds. And I think it's documentably false advertisement. I think false advertisement should be illegal.
I don't know, man. I just hardcore disagree with that. But anyway, we can move on. We don't have to, go back and forth forever about this stuff. I guess we can go through a few super chats before we get out of here.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Dieter McBusiness, for the 199. Please come out of this convo, Advocacy Allies. Hey, I think it was a pretty productive convo. I think that we had a really good conversation with Sam. And I don't know if you would consider us allies necessarily, but, there's a lot we agree on. And I think it's important to hash out the areas where we disagree as well. Because like I said, I think this is important stuff. I think it's important that the left does not come off like pearl clutchers. I think it's important that people feel like they do have the freedom to engage with whatever viewpoint they wish online. No one wants to have some corporation or some state intervening and saying, this is problematic. This is wrong. You're not allowed to watch this. You're not allowed to listen to that. That's a terrible look, and it's one I don't think we should in any way be defending.
I do. I'm a big nanny state guy. No, I'm kidding, obviously. Yeah, shout out to... I'm fucking kidding, Gavin. Relax. No, yeah, shout out to you, Dieter McBusiness. And yeah, obviously it's important to talk about the shit that we disagree with Sam, because, I mean, on a fucking, Venn diagram, it's mostly overlap with the guy.
All right, let me find the next super chat. God, we got so many fucking comments on today's live stream. It's hard to find the super chats. Let me keep scrolling for a second, guys. Sit tight.
Yeah, I'm looking too.
Thank you, Mariposa, for the 199. Guillotine is guillotine is pronounced guillotine. That's right, guillotine. I tried to say it right. I know it's hard to fuck that one up and say guillotine or whatever, but yeah, I'll do better next time, Mariposa. Appreciate the super chat.
Hey, only I'm allowed to fuck up with Gavin's pronunciation of things.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mariposa. We appreciate that. And thank you also, Zach, the Celtics guy, for the $5. I lost all respect for Sam when he made childish insults at Aaron for his legitimate criticism of democracy now. That was just pathetic. I don't even know what specific incident you're referring to. I didn't watch Sam's coverage at the time, so I can't really comment on that one. But thanks anyway for the super chat.
Yep. Thank you, Zach, the Celtics guy. Yeah, I really enjoy your, Snoopy movie, or not Snoopy movie, a Goofy movie image right there.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. We appreciate that. Let me find the next super chat. Damn, you guys were active in chat today. I guess that proves it was a good convo, though, right? If you guys were,
everybody made up their own mind about how this went down, which I think is a really good sell.
Yeah, I mean that always kind of happens, right? people are just going to cheer for whoever they like more at the beginning. But still, I hope you guys found it to be a productive and interesting exchange, because it is a good conversation, right? But thank you again, Mariposa. Many of y'all defend right wingers' right to speech. I see y'all's point, but do you really think right wingers should defend the left getting censored? Sam's proposal of demonetization makes sense. See, I also disagree with that. Like, for example, I think that right wingers have every right to go publish a book about how Obama was a piece of shit, or whatever right wingers write books about these days. You know what I'm saying? Like, in the same way, I think that if you're a conservative person that has what I would consider to be incorrect viewpoints, you still have the right to make money off of your opinions. Like, again, going back to the Noam Chomsky quote, defending free speech means defending the free speech of your worst enemy. And so, yeah, in the same way that I think that like Bill O'Reilly should be able to write some stupid book and sell it in Barnes and Noble, I also think that unfortunately Steven Crowder should be able to make money doing his bullshit on YouTube, making money off of it, just like how I make money on my political viewpoints.
Yeah, by and large, I agree with that. The only caveat I would offer, and the one that we got really hung up on for a while, is that, say that like I make a 2-hour long piece of mammoth content, like a stream, and I'm Joe Rogan. Those used to be really long, right? And that specific stream becomes litigated. Oh no, like, I would support like demonetizing the specific stream, but I agree with you, Gavin. Like, I think if you can provide a specific example of somebody violating a law, let's put it that way, because let's just exist with the laws that we do have. In the same way, like if you break the law, then I think you should be able to demonetize that content. But until the law is broken, I think you have to be able to have a field day with it, right? So that would be my position. But I think if you break the law, I don't think you should be allowed to fucking make a fortune off of
I mean, I disagree with that too. I still think that people that are criminals have every right to like monetize their opinions like the rest of us. Like,
I didn't. Okay, I was just gonna say I agree with you. By and large, I'm not saying they should be banned permanently. I'm just saying that I don't think you should be entitled to monetize content that has violated the law. Like if I post, like for example, if I published a piece of fucking, and I guess this is a difference in opinion that you have, because I know you don't consider this to be the same, like should be held to the same threshold as like publishing something in print, right? But I would say that I would be sympathetic to the fact that, like, okay, if a book has a bunch of lies and things that can be in a court of law like demonstrated to not be true, the publisher will pull it because they're liable for all these fucking lawsuits, right? In the same way, I think you should just apply that to internet content.
Sure, maybe when it comes to a specific piece of content, but should that person then be barred from writing or selling their books going forward? No, I don't think they should.
Not at all. No, that's not what I was arguing.
Agreed. I made that argument myself during the conversation with Sam. I specifically brought up Alex Jones and said this guy actually was found guilty. Therefore, yeah, sure, label his stuff on Sandy Hook misinformation. I'm not going to argue with that. But should everything he does be deplatformed and censored? I'm not saying that should happen either.
Yeah, no, I completely do agree with that. I think that I actually think that Alex Jones should be able to, put out any content that he likes until, it does violate the law. Same thing with like, the major news media outlets, all those fuckers, like until they break the law. Like I do think that MSNBC has the right to like spew toxic nonsense for the neoliberal order. But when they break the law, I think we should be able to hammer their ass on it. And the only point that I was, belaboring was that I think we could do a lot of work to make those laws more streamlined.
Sure. But we do see this happen. Like, for example, when Fox News was facilitating the spread of disinformation about the election conspiracies, and Dominion, the voting machine company, threatened to sue them, they stopped doing it. So like that, these systems already are in place. They already do work. Like, I don't know how I don't think we need to open up the libel laws or whatever. I think that's only going to result in more rich people and corporations suing their critics. Like, people threaten to do all the time. And if we make it easier for them to do that, then I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, you think it takes 10 years to get the Sandy Hook family's justice, though, because of the Alex Jones thing? Like that was, I think that is a fucking glaring fucking problem, that it takes 10 years and millions of dollars to bring somebody to justice, because then it does allow only the rich people to be able to defend themselves from any kind of slander. You can say anything you want, and you have to be a rich person in order to fucking defend yourself, which I think it becomes its own problem. It's a really complicated issue. I don't know. I don't pretend to have all the fucking answers. That's why I'm trying to be fluid. I'm not like, I don't know. I see a lot of points on both sides on this. I know everybody fucking hates fence sitters.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Mariposa. Really appreciate the $9.99. I do. And thank you also, the politician, for the $2. Ivermectin proven to help. MSN smeared it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think some of the recent studies I've seen say the opposite. Don't think you should have the right to hold that viewpoint in public or online. Like, I don't think that should be a viewpoint that's considered like, oh, this is a unacceptable viewpoint to have. Like, if that's how you feel, then I'm not going to stop you from feeling that way. Again, unless you're literally being paid by the company of ivermectin in order to spread that line. If that's just the conclusion you've reached, then I'm sorry, but that's a permissible viewpoint, in my opinion. Just like how I think that people that totally reject modern medicine and they just want to, can meditate and smoke weed or whatever, like Rastafarians. Is it incorrect? Yes. Do I think it's a permissible viewpoint that you should be allowed to have? Also, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that you said there that I completely agree with, right? If you're, but the one thing that I just think it becomes a little bit of a fucking like, I don't know how you prove this in a court of law and how you set this up in a way that is effective. Because one thing we've talked about, Gavin, is the fact that audience capture is a very real thing. And that a lot of people's income is tied up to what they are saying to their audience. And sometimes people will have very large whale contributors in their Patreon, right? And what if that person is making their money from, some ivermectin, right? And they're supplying you with $100,000 a month. They're not telling you what to say. It's not illegal, but you all are sure as shit not going to do anything to risk getting that $100,000 lump sum in your bank account. Now, I think that just becomes a question of, is it better to just keep it legal because, well, fuck, we don't want to censor anybody that's just out here making their own honest, good faith point, or do we want to litigate everybody? I think that becomes a fair argument to have. Shout out to you, the Politican.
Yeah. I mean, I think if the person disclosed they were paying you for that specific reason, then that would basically be no different. But if it's some random Patreon, like, or patron supporter, like, I mean, we have patron supporters that give us like $100 a month. I don't know what they want us to say. Like, I don't know what they like want me to be saying. I'm not like changing my commentary on the attempt to try to keep them around. Like, clearly not. So I don't know.
So you don't believe that audience capture actually does exist and that people do tailor what they say in order to keep and retain their audience in Patreon? Because I think it's pretty clear that it does exist.
Well, audience capture is different than a $100,000 Patreon supporter paying you specifically to say something. What?
Well, that was a hyperbole.
Okay, well, you know what I'm saying. Like, yeah, audience capture is obviously a thing. It's unfortunate, I guess, but that's always happened. Like, that's what cable news. That happens on cable news too. Why do you think MSNBC went full Russiagate? It was because that's what their audience wanted to hear. Like, yeah, unfortunately, perverse incentives exist. I don't see why. Like, I don't understand what the solution to that is necessarily that you're proposing.
Well, I mean, in the case of the Russiagate, I mean, I think that they were like, they should be held, criminally responsible for publishing things that were not true. I straight up think that you have a responsibility as a fucking news outlet to publish the truth or run corrections. And I think that if you caught red-handed knowingly covering it up and as a news organization, then yeah, I think that that's a problem. And I think that that's essential to having a press that is at all trusted by the people. And I think it's a clear example of why nobody fucking trusts our press right now.
Yeah, I think that would set an absolutely terrible precedent, because then everyone that has a position that's outside of the mainstream could just be held to the same standard. And, anyone that's saying something that's conspiratorial or saying like, actually, Iraq does not have weapons of mass destruction. Well, that was considered the conspiratorial position at the time. That was considered the factually incorrect position at the time. A decade later, we know that's not the case. Those people were 100% right. But if you're upholding these standards, then people have said, well, there's evidence. Colin Powell showed the little vial of uranium or whatever. There's evidence. Why are you stating falsehoods? You could use that same argument against people that are actually telling the truth. And that's exactly what they would do, because that's what the cable news is. It's a function of the establishment. So of course they're going to always try to silence the people that are actually telling the truth, the actual anti-establishment voices. That's what happens.
I mean, that's true, but I mean, I would argue that they never proved that there were examples of weapons of mass destruction, and that it wouldn't have survived the scrutiny of litigation. But I mean, I guess to me, that's a double-edged sword, though, that you're going to have to grapple with. Then that the fact that there will never be fucking trusted media in this country because of the fact that that essentially you have to let go of the idea that there will ever be like a trustworthy media, that there will ever be a kind of place where you can go and actually just fucking read the news. And I guess I can see your point of view on that, but I guess I'm not just so quick to give up on a potential world where there actually is a robust news system that informs its people effectively. Like,
well, again, we're talking about a little bit different than just straight news. We're talking about opinion commentary online. If you want to talk about, creating a fucking Bureau of Disinformation or a Ministry of Truth or whatever in order to say these viewpoints are correct, these ones aren't, and then enforce it accordingly, I don't think that would help. I would rather listen to a disparate band of, normal people on the internet. I'd rather get my news from those people than have one newspaper, one cable news channel. This is the truth. Listen to this, and these are the correct viewpoints. Like, I know you're rolling your eyes at me, but isn't that kind of the end result of what you're talking about?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is that that it's like literally the exact opposite of what I'm saying. Is that actually what I'm saying is that we should have a bunch of indisparate bands of news outlets that should be held to a unanimous standard that says if you publish things knowingly that are not true,
but how do you prove intent? Like, I think Rachel Maddow and Cenk Uygur and all the Russiagators, I think they would have said, this is the truth. Look at this. They met with the Russians in the Trump Tower and these exchanges were made and this email happened. And they literally said, we have dirt on Hillary. There is clear proof that, Trump colluded with Russia. At the time, they wouldn't have said that this is false at all. And even if you read the Mueller report, it says Trump colluded with the Russians, even though he wasn't charged for it. So again, I don't agree with the claims made in Russiagate, but if you want to say, well, you have to find proof for it, I think you could point to some proof where, again, if you want to engage in that conversation, you should have the right to. Do I think that Cenk Uygur or Rachel Maddow should be held criminally responsible for the viewpoints they express? No, I literally don't. I think that should be a permissible realm of discussion to have. Did our president collude with the foreign government? I think that's an okay thing to talk about.
Yeah, I think it is too. And if it, then you would take it through and would survive the scrutiny of whatever we've publicly decided. Like, I just think that that's an ideal system, right? Like, I just think that, yeah, and it's a shitty version of it. And I'm saying that we could strengthen it and make it better. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying we have a fucking horrible version of this, but I think the idea behind it has some merit. This idea that you can't just go willy-nilly publishing whatever the fuck you want to. I think that there is some merit to that. I understand you have to walk around a lot of landmines, and you're doing a great job bringing all of those up. But I don't know. It's interesting. It's a good conversation that we've been having.
Clearly, yeah. Thank you so much, though, for the super chat. And also thank you, Sir Switch Crookington. This stream has more views than Sam's whole channel. Not quite, unfortunately. Not quite. But, we're growing. We're growing. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're not already. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the lively discourse today.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know. I'm reading the comments. I know I'm Ministry of Truthing, blue no matter whoing, all of this over here. I'm just thinking out loud here. I think that these are thoughts that a lot of people probably have when they're listening to these kinds of conversations, and I wanna articulate them. So, but yeah, and I also don't think we have nearly as many views as Sam's whole channel, but I really, really wish we did.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sir Switch Crookington. Really appreciate that. Trying to find the next super chat here. Let's go down. Thank you so much, Rod. Gavin, whataboutism is exhausting and a waste of time. Kudos to Sam for putting up with LOL. You could say whataboutism is fucking exhausting, but if you're talking about opening up the ability to censor people for viewpoints that are outside of the establishment, or that the establishment is not considered to be correct or right or problematic or whatever, I do think you have to bring up other examples, because that is going to open up a slippery slope. And if you're going to say, well, this person can't say this because it's incorrect, then you have to say that about other people too. Again, if you're going to say that people aren't allowed to talk about the vaccine on their podcast, I don't think it's that far of a leap to say people can't talk about cigarettes either. I think cigarettes have killed far more people. Far more people have died of lung cancer and the carcinogenic effects of cigarette smoking and tobacco use in general than have died of COVID. So I don't think it's really that much of a whataboutism to say, well, what if we extend that principle elsewhere to another aspect of society that's also dangerous? Or what if I wanted to say, like, fucking, I don't know. There's a million examples you could bring up. What if I wanted to go on the podcast and say, when I ride my motorcycle, I don't wear a helmet because it's stupid and dumb? Like, technically, if everyone listening follows that advice, some of them are going to end up dying because they get in a wreck and they weren't wearing a helmet because they listened to my advice, or seatbelts in a car. Do I think that I should still be allowed to have that opinion and to state it publicly without fear of being censored? Yes, I do. So that would be my response to that. But, thanks for the pushback.
Yeah, I actually think that the cigarette analogy was probably one of the strongest one used. I like it because, I mean, look, obviously everybody has the right to go out there and do like a tobacco enthusiast podcast. I have a homie that goes to this Fidel's tobacco shop and buys a cigar and gets a glass of wine at the fucking bar I work out and sits outside and enjoys it. Now, if that person wanted to do a fucking, wine and cigar pairing podcast and talk about how much they love it, how it relaxes them, how it's good for their soul and all these kinds of things, like naturally, like I wouldn't have a problem with that. But on the same page, I don't have a problem with like the actual cigar and cigarette having like a warning label on them. I don't know. I hate to be the fence setter here, but I just feel like there's a way of like, let people talk about it. Right. Maybe. And honestly, the more I think about it, because I was thinking about the ivermectin thing too, or buying a motorcycle, or it's tough, right? Because on the one hand, like I'm like, yeah, this is bullshit. And I don't believe that corporations should be able to wield these, big talkers, these raconteurs, in a way of like making money off of them, like fucking effectively like misleading people, right? But on the other hand, it's like, well, if you can't just walk in, you can't just walk into a fucking store and buy ivermectin. I guess you could walk in and buy like fucking horse ivermectin, which a lot of people fucking did, but at least that has a label on it. I don't know. It's really interesting conversation. I'm having a lot of internal dialogue here, but I really appreciate everybody for hanging in and tuning in. But I thought you did a good job, Gavin.
Well, I think you did a great job too. I just didn't realize we had this difference of opinion. But I'm also in favor of cigarettes having a label on them that say this is a dangerous product. That's different though than someone's First Amendment right to say, I like cigarettes and I think you should go smoke them. Like, that's different than actually labeling a product, because the product is actually the thing that's causing the cancer. The commentator is the one just giving his opinion. So yeah, do I think that cigarettes should be labeled? Yes. Do I think that commentators who smoke them should have a label on their content? No, I think that's ridiculous. Same thing with alcohol or cheeseburgers or any of the other multitude of activities we engage in as a society, which could be considered harmful or dangerous or unproductive.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. The one reason where I was like giving the example of the banner, and I want to be clear about this, because I think that in the case like Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow, where they are basically like like that is the one, like, where else are you going to get the warning label like you get on cigarettes, right? And I guess and like cigarettes will legitimately kill you. Fucking Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson won't actually kill you, but I do think at some point they violate some false advertisement lines when they in a court of law are arguing that they're entertainment, and in public they're arguing that they're news. They're presenting themselves as news. They're on a news channel where all they do is talk about the news. I just think that at some point those corporations, and I mean, Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson are just employees. So really it is like, my focus again, I agree with Sam, should be always on the corporations that are profiting off of them. Because then I just think it becomes a false advertisement issue more so than another issue. Because do you think you should be able to portray yourself as the news and then go up there and not do it? And I guess that's fine as long as you're not legally arguing that you're one thing while like selling a product that says it's another, because that's
well, do you not
what they're doing.
Do you not think that newspapers and magazines should have an opinion editorial section? Because that's what opinion commentators are. Like, yeah, the Rolling Stone or the New Yorker, it's presenting itself as a place where you get your news, but there's still a section in it where you go to read opinion commentary. And that is literally the role of someone like Tucker, Rachel Maddow, you and I. We're opinion commentators. We're not legally claiming to be giving you 100% factual arguments or information. Like, we're not just fucking C-SPAN or whatever. Like, the point of our show, I think most people would agree that watch us, the point of our show is that we're giving you our opinion, in the same way that I think most people would understand that if you watch Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow or whatever other opinion commentator, they're editorializing. That's the point. They're not just reading talking points of factual information.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, maybe everybody doesn't think. I have a hard time thinking that everybody that watches Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson thinks that it's entertainment and not news. But maybe that's true.
Well, there's sometimes a mix. I mean, infotainment is a thing. Like Jon Stewart, for example, like he was giving a lot of opinions interspersed with facts. Like you can make entertainment out of news. That is a thing, and we do it here at the Vanguard.
But the punchline of Jon Stewart's whole bit about that and people would be like, you do this, and he would be like, yeah, but I go on after puppets. I don't go on a fucking show that's called a news network, right? You know what I mean? Like, people know when you're watching Jon Stewart that you're getting a comedy show. And not that people need hand holding. I get it. People can make up their fucking minds. But I don't know. I just think it becomes, I don't know. I think all this at some point is, I don't know. I looking at the like implications, no matter which way you go, I just see problems. And I think that's the whole issue here. Is like, no matter where you go, there is not going to be like any perfect situation where nothing bad happens, right? Like, it's just a matter of which outcomes are going to be worse, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no way to argue that having free speech absolutism fucking solves every problem, right? In the same way that like having censorship creates a fuckload of problems, right? You know what I mean? So I guess that's the kind of the nature of this beast, is that obviously there are going to be holes that you can point out. It's a matter of which one's going to create the worst outcome.
Well, yeah, no one is arguing that their position would like create a utopia or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that free speech absolutism is going to lead to a perfect society. I just think on the principled, support that I feel for the First Amendment, I'm going to defend people's right to free speech even when I disagree with them. And yeah, the Tucker Carlson, Rachel Maddow thing, that's a whole different issue in my opinion. Like, we can have a different debate about that, but that's not really what we're talking about. The whole point of this conversation was to talk about internet censorship and social media deplatforming. I just don't really see how bringing like Tucker Carlson's infotainment into the picture, like, really, like,
well, because I think if you compare the numbers that Joe Rogan gets to what Tucker Carlson gets, I mean, I don't think it's really that relevant whether one of them's hosted on Spotify and one of them's hosted on cable news. But I mean, I guess I see your point. They're both internet commentators in the sense that the content that they produce is pretty similar. They're giving their take on things, but I mean, I guess one's owned by a different kind of corporation. And that's what it really comes down to for me. On a person-to-person independent level, I don't give a fuck what anybody says. And I don't think that you should be persecuted for it unless you're being persecuted by other people who fucking hate you for your beliefs and want to, tell you that. I don't think you should be, shunned or silenced or whatever. To me, the hang up for me is the profiting of the corporations for all of it. And that was the one thing that this conversation gave me pause about. It was something I never considered. And so I'm still unpacking it in my brain. I don't know exactly where I'll come down on it, because I think that there's a potential to argue that your free speech, I don't know, on the internet. Yeah, I don't know. It depends. Where is it on the internet? Like, what's the difference between Twitter and what's the difference between Spotify? What's the difference? I think all those things are just really interesting questions that I'm still thinking about. But shout out to you, AV, for the $5 super sticker.
Yeah, thanks so much, AV. Really appreciate that. And thank you also, Mariposa, for the $1.99. My big takeaway is that Gavin prioritizes optics. Gonna have to disagree with you on that one, Mariposa. I prioritize my principled support of the First Amendment and of free speech. I actually don't always go where the optics best align with the case. Like, for example, I'm willing to admit that defund the police is not always the best optics for the left. Sometimes that's not a winning issue. Do I still believe in defund the police? You're damn right I do. I 100% believe in defund the police, even if it's not the most 100% best optic thing ever. Like, should every candidate run on that? Not necessarily. Do I not support it? I absolutely support it, and I'd happily debate someone on that issue too. So it's not like my positions are just formed based on the what's most optically positive. Not at all. I go where my principles lead me, and this is one that I happen to feel very passionate about, and then I happen to disagree with a lot of people on the left, like Sam on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's much for me to say about this one. I feel like we had a really good discussion, though, and I mean, I think we've really just showed that there's a lot to discuss here, and it shows the importance of how we're talking, right? You know what I mean? Like, I think the fact that we've been, Gavin and I pretty much thought I agreed with Gavin 100% on this when I came in here. Now I'm realizing we're going to be able to have some good conversations about this and pick each other's brains. That's good. That shows that there's a wide range of people who are thinking about this. So that's my big takeaway, is that a lot of people are interested in having this conversation. And yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks, Mariposa. Really appreciate the super chat. And thank you, Jonathan. Really appreciate that as well for the $2. Good job, Van guys. We'll appreciate it, man. Hope that you're enjoying the show. Seems like you are. Really appreciate the positive comments and the super chat.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Recognize you from the chat, so it's always good to see familiar faces.
Yeah, appreciate it, Jonathan. And thank you also, Uno, for the $1.99. ACLU was defending speech blacks for being hanged. Not sure exactly what specific case you're referring to, Uno. But thanks for the super chat.
I mean, this could be the Skokie, like a reference to like the Skokie, Illinois thing in the 70s. Obviously, in the 70s, there was all kinds of unconscionable behavior being, remnants from the Jim Crow South and fucking hangings were happening at that time. That the ACLU was saying in Skokie, Illinois, the Nazi party had a right to march and demonstrate. I think those two things are a little bit different, and that they can, do both of those things. They were obviously massively opposed to the, terror and violence that for generations have been imposed on Black men and women in the South. So, but yeah, I think that's the point that they were making.
Absolutely. And thank you also, Dieter McBusiness, once again for the $9.99. Really appreciate that. Simple approach to free speech is the best. Let people say what they want as long as they're not calling for violence or disturbing the peace. Let public discourse sort out public opinion and values. Yeah, like I said to Sam, if you're literally threatening violence, if you're calling for the extermination of a population and saying, go to this place and start shooting or something like that, obviously I'm not against that being permitted on any platform whatsoever. That's against the law, literally. But when it comes to stuff, this is someone's opinion, for example, I think that should be 100% allowed, like you're saying, Dieter McBusiness. So really appreciate the super chat. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, look, by and large, I agree that, if you're not calling for violence or you're not, disturbing the peace, I'm even like way more lax on than a lot of people have. I think if it's public property, you have the right to disturb some peace in a little bit. But anyway, yeah, for the most part, I agree with you too. It's just more on the fringes where I have some, thoughts. But shout out to you, American Wasp. You're always there in the comment section. Dieter McBusiness, appreciate you too.
It still sounds fine. But anyway, Zach's plugging in his microphone again. Thank you so much, Dieter. Really appreciate that. Thank you also, Befar Lugar, for the $1.99. Great job, guys. Glad you thought we did a good job. I thought it was a great conversation. I thought we presented our perspective in a pretty forceful way, but not in a, unproductive way. I tried to do a little bit better this time. So yeah, thank you so much, Beffa. Really appreciate that. And thank you once again, Rod, for the $2. Jackass example is a home run, Zach. Congrats.
LOL. Thanks, bro. To be honest, I actually don't know about that, but I still have a lot of mixed feelings about that. I'm not saying that like I want our podcast to have a fucking like, oh, here's the YouTube or the fucking Wikipedia page linked to it. I mostly was trying to use that as like supplemental example of like, here's an example of a TV show having a fucking, disclaimer, and that's to cover the ass of the fucking studio, right? Not for any benefit of the people, really. But I was just using that as like kind of an example as something that I would be okay seeing in front of Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow after they'd, received that, lawsuit.
Absolutely. And thank you, by the way, David, also for the $5. Great debate. Gavin, imagine how much better the debate with Aaron would have been if you treated him with the same respect and seriousness you gave Sam. Well, what can I say? I'm good at taking feedback and criticism, and I tried to take a little bit of a different approach this time. I still don't think that I was like, horribly disrespectful to Aaron or whatever, but I acknowledge that, a lot of people were turned off by the way that I conducted myself in that debate. So I tried to take that feedback and, come into this one with a little bit more of an even head. I was also just kind of in a pissy mood that day. So it is what it is, but I'm glad you thought we did a better job this time, David.
Yeah, I wouldn't fucking worry about the last debate. I thought that Sam debated in a lot better faith anyway. So who fucking cares? That might've had something to do with it.
Perhaps, but thanks anyway, David. Really appreciate that. And thank you once again, Mari Posa. The problem is Joe Rogan is entertainment in a court of law, but listeners regard him as news. It's parallel to what Colbert is doing on national TV. Well, I mean, if viewers regard him that way, then they're fucking stupid. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, can opinion commentators not talk about things that are going on in the world? Is that the stance you want to embrace, Mari Posa? Because again, obviously Joe Rogan is not news. He's not claiming to be news. It's not like his show is called Joe Rogan's Objective News Show. Like, it's very clearly him and his dude bros hanging out and giving their opinions. Like, again, should opinion commentators just not be allowed to talk about anything that's going on that affects our lives in massive ways, which COVID obviously does? Even though I disagree with Joe, I still think he has the right to have those conversations. And if that's how he feels, well, I'd rather him express that than feel like he can't because we live in a fucking nanny state where he's going to be censored if he does.
Yeah, I mostly think that Joe Rogan can say whatever the fuck he wants, as long as I think that if it's like documentably like fucking like a problem that we've decided in a court of law is a real issue, then yeah, you should be able to be sent down a citation. But I'm pretty sure that's where I've landed on this. It's like, yeah, I think that, if you can give the guy a fucking like, oh, I don't know, violated this law and you want to sue him for it, and it goes through and a public jury of his peers say this is fucking a problem, then I think you hand that bill to Spotify and you say, fuck you, Spotify. This is proof that he is doing bad shit. And then you talk about on your show, see, this guy was kind of like what we did with Tucker Carlson and Rachel Maddow. We say, hey, they're so unserious. They've actually been ruled this way. But I mean, I'm not calling for Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson to be taken off the airwaves, right? I'm not saying that they should have their show removed, right? In the same way that I wouldn't say that Joe Rogan's show should have his show removed. No. I'm just saying, if in a court of fucking law and a jury of your fucking peers, or not that Joe Rogan has any real fucking peers, he lives on a like fucking compound in Austin, Texas, but you know what I mean? Jury of fucking plebes find him guilty of something, then I think you fucking slap that fine on him. But I do also just agree with Gavin that you're a fucking idiot if you think this guy is a news anchor.
And also, like Pfizer, Moderna, whatever, they can sue Joe. Like that is their right to do. They absolutely can do so. Just like how Dominion, the voting company, threatened to sue Fox News for spreading, election conspiracies. If they want to do that, they can do that. Like there's literally nothing stopping Pfizer from sending Joe Rogan a cease and desist letter and saying, stop doing this or we're going to sue you. Like that is how the system currently works. So I just don't understand why, that is how it works already.
Yeah, 100%. I think it sucks that you have to have the fucking fortune to sue somebody like that, though. That's the one caveat that I would add, right? Like a regular person, Joe Schmo, that's pissed off about Joe Rogan giving off that information might not have the fucking juggernaut power to get that off of the ground. But yeah,
that would just clog up the legal system with a bunch of people having petty grievances with whoever their favorite commentator is. Like, I don't think that's a good way to do it either.
No, that's true. There has to be a third way that's not massively like classist and also not unsustainable. I agree. But the only other thing I was going to add is that I think the Dominion is a great example, because see how fast Joe Rogan would shut the fuck up if an actual case was presented to him that he was going to lose him, or Spotify would shut him the fuck up, because that's the whole deal, right? If you can prove, I totally support Dominion fucking saying, yeah, shut the fuck up, Fox News. I think that's justice served, right? That's like the one aspect of justice you can probably get from the fucking corporations in this from the oligarchs in this world, right? So I would like to see that happen. If there is a case where Joe Rogan has broken the law, I want to see that suit brought and see if it fucking prevails in a court of law. That would be interesting. But until that happens, I kind of rest on the other side of it.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason, by the way, that Pfizer or Moderna or whatever has not sued Joe Rogan is because they know that won't hold up in a court of law, because he clearly is just giving his opinion and there's no intent there, which you have to prove in order to defame them. If they could prove intent, then they would have done that. But since they can't, that's why they haven't filed any said lawsuit. And I think that's an important part of the process too, because, you're entitled to whatever opinion you have, as long as you're not intentionally spreading it to harm people or to defame someone. I think that's how it should work. But anyway, thanks a lot, Mario Posa. Really appreciate your comment today. And thank you, Rod, for the $2. Zach, I'm guess you're trying to say Zach owns. I'm gonna go with that one.
Hey, I'll take the W's where I can get them, rare as they might be.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rod. We appreciate that. Let me go down. Thank you, Das Busa Fleisch. Sam left. Now the real debate starts. Yeah, it is funny. We almost had an equal length debate between ourselves as we did with Sam. Hope you guys enjoyed that one too. You got 2 for the price of 1 today.
Dude, honestly, we always talk about how I'm like, it is damn good content when we debate. I think we just have a really good tendency of fleshing out our fucking ideas. So we don't get to disagree that often. So yeah, I would say that we had a really good exchange of ideas.
Same. Yeah, absolutely. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me keep going. I know we got a couple more super chats, but thanks again, Das Busa Fleisch. Really appreciate it. Going down. Thank you, Ashawn Harris, for the $4.99. Did you guys watch the RBN conversation with Jackson? No, did not watch that. Probably won't, but appreciate the super chat.
Yeah. Shout out to you, Ashwin Harris. Appreciate the $4.99.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you so much. Also, thank you, Addy the Bug Catcher. Really appreciate that. I joined late towards the end again. I'll have to go back and watch the whole thing. Sounded like a great conversation. Cheers. Yeah, let me know what you think, Addy, when you do get around to doing that. I thought it was an awesome conversation, really productive. I think we both did a really good job today. I think that we expressed our viewpoints in a clear and concise way, made some really good points. Even Sam agreed with us a few times. So I thought it was a great conversation. Cheers right back at you, Addy.
Yeah, shout out to you. I thought it was a great conversation. I thought that we had a wide gamut, man. I mean, obviously we had 2 hours and 15 minutes worth of conversation. So AD, you've got a lot of catching up to do. But yeah, shout out to you, fam.
Thank you so much. And thank you also, Ivy by E. Really appreciate the $5. Love the show. Check out the up and coming channel, The People's Advocate. Still growing, but very on point with lefty relationship / communal values. Hell yeah. Thank you so much, Ivy, for the $5. I'll definitely look into that. Feel free to follow us on Twitter as well. Maybe get a collab happening at some point in the near future. That sounds cool. If in fact your channel is as based as you make it sound.
Yeah, absolutely. I just took a look at it over there. So shout out to you. Keep doing what you do. Obviously, it's a hard grind going up against the algorithm. That was probably the one thing that I agreed with Sam the most, is that when he was like, well, the algorithm across the board is fucked up. It's like, yeah, dude, the algorithm across the board is fucked up. No disagreement from anybody that makes content for a living that they're peddling right-wing fucking corporate shit above the rest of us. So, solidarity to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ivy. And thanks once again for the 150 super sticker. We really appreciate that. Hope you enjoy the conversation and our content in general. Ivy, again, looking forward to checking out some of yours. And let's keep going. I know we got some more super chats. Thank you once again, Addy the Bug Catcher, for the $10. You can read this one, Zach. It's for you.
Cheer up, Zach. This one's for you because you always pronounce my name right. 80. I think I fucked it up today, actually, and you just sent us a super chat. So I apologize for that. Great post-debate conversation, both of you. Well, thank you. Yeah, I thought it was a great fucking conversation. It's always good. This is the kind of shit that Gavin and I sometimes do off air after we finish up a conversation, but never this spicy. So I'm so glad it was on camera.
Yeah, no, there obviously no reason to be down on yourself, bro. I thought it was a great conversation. I thought you did a great job. But yeah, thank you so much. And sorry I've been mispronouncing your name. I guess it's Adi. 80. Yeah. I've been saying Addy. So sorry, Adi. Right? Adi. 80.
I think it's 80, like
80. 80. Well, thank you so much, 80. Now I'm embarrassed. But thank you so much, 80. We really appreciate the super chats and the feedback. And yeah, Zach did a perfectly fine job. He did a great job.
We all did. This is a harmonious podcast. Everybody's a winner. We're from the generation where everybody gets a trophy. Sam can have a trophy too.
There you go. Anyway, thank you so much, 80. And thank you, Glenn, for the $10. Really appreciate that, Glenn. Currently deployed in Kuwait, but I'm from Olathe. Graduated from South in 09. Love the show, guys. Well, wow. I hope you're, safe over there, man. That's wild. That's crazy that someone's, watching our show from Kuwait. So again, hope you're safe and doing okay, man. But thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for the super chat. And that's cool. We always love interacting with and hearing from some of our comrades that are from the Kansas City area. So that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, dude, we might actually have gone to the same middle school then, depending on where you grew up. If you went to Olathe South, I went to Indian Trail Middle School, which is literally one parking lot over. They are like this to each other. And my house was right behind the Garment campus. So it was like a fucking stone's throw to Olathe South. But I was a fucking degenerate, so I got transferred over to Olathe North High School instead, where all the riffraff could roam freely. Gavin over here with the, future noblemen and magistrates and all that kind of stuff.
Anyway, thank you so much, Glenn. We really appreciate that. Let me see if we got any more super chats. I think we probably did. We got so many chats in general today. It's like overwhelming trying to scroll through them all. I don't want to miss anything. But thank you, Christina. I missed the debate, but I'll catch it when you post the content later. Yeah, definitely check it out, Christina, and let us know what you thought. I thought it was a great exchange. I know I've said that like a million times, but I thought it was really productive. It went even better than I was hoping. So, hopefully you enjoy it, Christina. Let us know where you fall on the issue itself. It's definitely an interesting and nuanced debate. So, I think a lot of people will get a lot out of the conversation, regardless of whether they agree with myself or Sam or Zach or whoever.
Yeah, and to be honest, it was just cool to get to chat with Sam. He's always existed in this like ethereal sense to me. I've resisted the urge to make another Bob Burgers joke. I didn't want to fucking go to the well twice on that. I busted it out yesterday. I was gonna be like, hey Sam, I'm actually a huge fan of yours. I never miss an episode of Bob's Burgers, like kind of shit. But I was like, no, let's not start this off on the wrong foot. And I don't want to piss him off and like blow this thing. So anyway, yeah, it was cool though, because I'm like, damn, that guy actually has like a legitimate career in the entertainment world, which is something that Gavin and I are really into on the side. We like, media content. And I like Bob's Burgers a lot. I've actually fucking watched Bob's Burgers basically since it came out. So not like religiously, but like a lot.
Yeah, Bob's Burgers is a great show. I feel like a lot of people don't know that, but Sam actually plays like the restaurant inspector. I think his name is Hugo. Yeah, on Bob's Burgers, which is a absolutely hilarious character. And I've been a long time fan of Bob's Burgers, so it is always funny when I'm listening to it now. I'm like, hey, that's Sam Cedar's voice, Anyway, appreciate you, Christina. Really appreciate that. Thank you also, MX Row, for the 199. Good argument, Gavin and Zach. Glad you appreciate it, man.
Yeah, dude, people like that shit because we can have good, forceful arguments with each other. And it's nicer, too, because, like, neither of us are going to, like, fucking get out of our chairs and start taking the shirt out. You fucking, like some other Twitch streamers we know. But also, yeah, I thought it was a good discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just about does it. I'm making sure we didn't miss any super chats. But I think we got to all of them. So thank you guys all for the contributions today. Again, hope you enjoyed the discussion. I thought it was really productive and obviously just surreal to actually have a debate with Sam Seder, someone we've, obviously done a lot of commentary about and have criticized him in the past quite a bit. So it was nice to, be able to have that conversation in person, say some of those criticisms to his face and, hear his pushback. So really good time, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. And also thank you. I know that, you didn't super chat, but it's okay. We appreciate the kind words. Super good argument. Agree more with y'all than Sam. Appreciate that. And also we got one more super chat from Beffer. Thank you for the $4.99. Can you imagine Aaron Mate on Bob's Burgers? Yeah, at this point, might as well just start handing out voice acting gigs to all of the left-wing YouTubers, right?
Gavin and I would sign up. I do a lot of voices. I'm willing to commit for low amounts of pay. I'm kidding, of course. I don't know. But anyway, shout out to you, Beffer Luger. I don't know if this was supposed to say, who could you imagine Aaron Mate on Bob's Burgers, or could you imagine Aaron Mate on? Either way, I probably just couldn't. I don't think he has any interest in doing that either. But shout out to you, Beffer Luger. Slap that like button.
Slap
people.
it. Yeah, slap it, guys. We're about to get out of here for the day. So on the way out, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed the conversation, and subscribe also. That way you'll, be privy to our next conversation. We try to do debates at this point pretty regularly. I feel like we're getting more into our element when it comes to debating. And obviously, we've had a little bit of experience now. So we hope you guys enjoyed that. Again, hit the subscribe button if you're not already. That way you don't miss our next live stream, and our next debate/interview should be coming up in the near future. And obviously we always like to start and end our live streams with a big old huge shout out to the patron community. So thank you guys so much for the support. We really appreciate the support from our patrons. It makes this show possible. And if you guys are also new to the channel, maybe just tuning in for the first time or haven't in a while, we are working on a few documentaries right now that are about to roll out in the immediate future. Like this, first of these documentaries should be rolling out later this week, or I guess next week. It's Sunday right now. So maybe on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, something like that, we'll be premiering our first documentary and following it up with another one just a couple weeks later. So again, that work is made 100% possible by our patron community. If you're interested in seeing some more of the kind of documentary or on the road content from Zach and I, then, consider throwing us a few bucks a month if you're able to. It really does help. It really does make that stuff possible, as well as just the, general kind of content we produce. It's a full-time job for us, work on this all day long. It's, a lot harder than it may look. So we really appreciate it, guys. We really genuinely do. Thank you so much to everyone supporting the show. Links in the description. If you enjoy our content, feel free to hit it up. Obviously, if not, totally understandable. All we ask is that you hit that like button. That's 100% free if you enjoy the show and the content we create. Good way to support us. So, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Had a great time.
Yeah, it was an awesome stream. Shout out to everybody. I'm going to go hug my Joe Biden poster and get started on my Ministry of Truth Lego replica. So you guys know what kind of deal it is. We're ripping off breaking points. We're going to have one shit lib and Gavin. So no, it's going to be a great time. I think you guys are going to really like it. That's the big announcement we have coming on Wednesday. No, peace out, everybody.
Yeah, peace, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We'll see you next week.